across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. We're talking about a number of issues today. We're talking about the trade deal. We're talking about what the Pope should do. We're talking as well about a man who burned the Quran facing charges for harassing Islam. There aren't blasphemy laws in this country. There haven't been for nearly 20 years. Why has this charge been brought now? The CPS says it's been changed from the original charge, but both Robert Jenrick and the Liberal Democrat Tim Farron are very worried about it. This is a man who burned a copy of the Quran who's been charged with harassing Islam, which risks creating a backdoor blasphemy law in Britain. That's what Robert Jenrick is warning. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into a lot of different issues today. I want your thoughts on all of it. The US-UK trade deal, a huge relief to ministers. Businesses are calling for more clarity. We just don't know what's going on. The prisons minister says that gangs hold such influence over jails that he finds it hard to sleep at night. And should pupils be given military training to instill discipline, restore national pride and get them fitter? That is what a survey says. What do you think about that? Let me know your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can also give me your views on the Specsavers boss expensing unicorn cupcakes for her child's birthday. It's my birthday in a couple of weeks, so I will be wanting some unicorn cupcakes on expenses. I think those perhaps will not be forthcoming. Let me know your thoughts on all of this. This is my show, but it's your show too, and there's plenty of time between now and 7 o'clock to get your voice and your view on the air. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, and remember the main number does three things. You can send me a voice note, you can give me a call, or you can send me a WhatsApp text message 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. Let's spend the time together here on Talk. Well, Alicia Fitzgerald is our political correspondent and joins me now. Good afternoon, Alicia.
Hi, Peter.
I want to get into the trade deal in a second, but first of all, just tell us about this man who burned the Quran facing charges for harassing Islam. Just take us through that.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting story. It's about a man who actually burned the copy of the Quran. He's now been charged with harassing, in inverted commas, Islam. And Robert Jenrick, he's the Shadow Justice Secretary, he has said that this charge against this man is for harassing the religious institution of Islam is potentially a threat to free speech. Just a bit of a word salad, that phrase, isn't it?
No worries, threat to free speech.
Robert Jenrick very against the fact that this man has been charged.
Yeah, it's a big issue, and Robert Jenrick has written about it today in the Telegraph. We'll return to that later in the show, but let's talk about the trade deal, because the Prime Minister talked yesterday on the trade deal with the US. This is what Starmer said.
This is going to boost trade between and across our countries. It's going to not only protect jobs but create jobs, opening market access. And as you say, Donald, the timing couldn't be more apt, because not only was it 80 years ago today that victory came for Europe after and at the end of the Second World War, but of course on that day the UK and the US stood together as the closest of allies, and now we take this into new and important territory by adding trade and the economy to the closeness of our relationship. It is built, as you say, on those notions of fairness and reciprocal arrangements. We've always had a fair and balanced arrangement between our countries. This builds on that, hugely important for sectors like car manufacturing and for steel and aluminium and so many others. And yes, we can finish ironing out some of the details, but there's a fantastic platform here, including, of course, on the tech side.
And Donald Trump, who was quiet there for the longest I think I've seen him in the last 100 or so days, he had high admiration for the UK and what he said.
Furthermore, in a historic step, the deal includes plans that will bring the United Kingdom into the economic security alignment with the United States. That's the first of its kind. So we have a big economic security blanket, and that's very important. And we feel very, very comfortable with that because it's been a great ally, truly one of our great allies. I mean,
Alicia, this is big politically, but there are challenges already. Lack of detail, some people not happy with the detail that is there already. Where does this stand politically? We'll talk to David Hennick in a second. He's the UK Director of the European Centre for International Political Economy. But in terms of what the politicians are saying about this, what's their view, Alicia?
Yeah, so the US basically, just to quickly sum up the details of the deal, they agreed to reduce import taxes on some British cars and allow some steel and aluminium into the country tariff-free. That's kind of the long and short of the deal. But it seems to have had really mixed reactions. We already heard from a director of UK Steel, so a really important figure in this, saying that he just doesn't know any of the details. He doesn't know when the deal comes into force. We don't know about any of the conditions. There are so many moving parts at the moment that weren't actually clarified yesterday. And of course, this is very fresh. And of course, we obviously saw the phone call between Donald Trump and Keir Starmer. But I mean, all of these details are really, really vital. We're hearing from obviously the Labour government that this is a massive deal, that this is all really important. But without these moving parts, I mean, we can't really make a fair assessment on the deal until we have all the details.
And the MPs as well have been calling for some time to have some sort of vote on it, some sort of say on it. Is this just going to be a fait accompli, or are we going to get people in Parliament actually having a say on it, do you think?
Well, definitely, there's a lot of pressure on Keir Starmer and on the government to have that kind of discussion. I mean, obviously, lots of people want to have their voices heard in Parliament about this and to have some kind of open and public conversation about this deal, whether they are pro or against, and all of the kind of things that potentially other people from other parties would want to change or add to this deal. But clearly, I think Keir Starmer wants this to be something that has the door very much shut. I think he's pretty happy with how the conversation went with Donald Trump yesterday. And I think the risk and the worry amongst the Labour top team is that by opening this up to Parliament, it will actually potentially give maybe the US some time to change their minds, as we have seen obviously happen before with Donald Trump's administration. So there are a lot of risks about it, but I think there's a lot of pressure piling on to Keir Starmer as well.
Alicia, thank you. That's Alicia Fitzgerald, political correspondent there. David Hennick is the UK Director of the European Centre for International Political Economy. David, thank you for joining me this afternoon. How much of this do we know, and how much of it are people still saying, actually, hold on a second, what is actually happening here? What are the rules going to be? Because it seems to me as if they've gone, this is all marvellous, this is all wonderful, here's the deal, without actually telling us really what it is.
Welcome to President Trump's world in trade terms, I'm afraid. You know, we're dealing with a president who kind of, you know, changes his mind from day to day, doesn't like to put too much down necessarily in writing, shifts around his positions. So what we know is limited in reality. We're pretty sure that the UK car sector will benefit. We're pretty sure that there's we have extra imports of potential imports of US beef and bioethanol. Beyond that, there's some commitments that are likely to happen, such as on UK steel, and some that with sort of general tariff reduction that may or may not happen. And I'm afraid we're just going to have to see, sort of almost day by day, what happens here. That's the way that Trump goes. I still think it's a decent deal for the UK as it stands, but you know, the lack of certainty is a problem.
What do we actually know? I mean, we heard Alicia talking there about the reduction on import tariffs, the fact that some beef will go back and forward. Is this a good deal, a mixed deal in terms of what we know so far? David, what's your assessment?
Look, this isn't a normal trade deal. No deal with President Trump is ever likely to be a normal trade deal. I think it's good because as long as we have managed to reduce some of the tariffs on UK cars. That's such a crucial sector to the UK. Exports to the US were really crucial there. If this protects jobs in the UK car sector, I think that makes it a good deal for the UK, particularly as we haven't had to give away a huge amount in return. So on that basis, I'm declaring this a good deal, but there are a couple of things that might change that. One, you just don't know what kind of deal Donald Trump does with somebody else tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So at the moment, the UK has it better than others. Could that be worse tomorrow? We don't know. The second one is that lack of detail. Look, I've been through those documents several times over. They're ambiguous. If somebody suddenly interprets them in a wildly different way and says actually nothing is agreed, or conversely says that lots of things have been agreed that aren't, who is to say? So it's the sort of bizarre world of Trump, but from what we think we know, it's good but limited.
Some of the things that I've seen said about this seem to be, to me anyway, David, and someone who's not an expert in international trade, I don't want to use the words blindingly obvious, but I just have. Some people saying, oh, Trump said that this couldn't have happened without Brexit. Well, yes, we can't do a national trade deal if we're part of the European Union. We're now not part of the European Union, and we can't do international trade deals. That's been obvious since 2016 and beforehand. I wonder as well, with the lack of clarity that you're talking about there for businesses, one thing that businesses just have not had in the last 10 years is any clarity, and this ambiguity will not be welcomed by them. What have businesses been saying? How have the markets been reacting? What's been the reaction there?
There's been no sort of surge in enthusiasm. I think there's been a sort of a general nod that this is a reasonable step, but it's not got people overly excited because of the issues with detail, because it's President Trump. So it's a sort of how to best put it, grudging acknowledgement. No, slightly better than that. An acknowledgement that something positive has happened, but a concern that we may never get to find out exactly what it all means. So in Trump world, we're always hanging on his word. So I think it's slightly positive, but look, it didn't deserve all the hype it got from Keir Starmer and others. But that's the way that President Trump goes. He needs hype. He wants you to hype it up. What are you going to do if you're the UK government? Not give him that he wants. He likes that stuff. So in that sense as well, I think there's a little bit too much complaining. I think you've got a UK government that is acting up to what the President of the United States needs. That's what UK governments normally do. Rachel Reeves has described it as a good deal. Darren Jones, her deputy, says 150,000 jobs have been protected, but the government would continue to negotiate in other sectors. I mean, do you agree that 150,000 jobs have been protected by this trade deal? There's always big numbers around these trade deals, and I always think they need to be taken with a huge pinch of salt. It's quite interesting on the political front. You've got the government supporting this, but you've actually got, I think I've seen Nigel Farage and Richard Tice both supporting it from the Reform Party. You've got some Conservatives who have supported it, but I've seen some Conservatives. I think they've given it qualified support, is what I would argue. But I think they're pro-Trump but less pro-Starmer, perhaps. So it sort of cuts a little bit across the political landscape, but I'm afraid trade deals are prone to this huge exaggeration. Now it's protecting hundreds of thousands of jobs. It's protecting some jobs. If JLR, if their numbers are protected out of this, that is something. We should your land over. Yeah, okay. David, listen, thank you very much. Thanks for your analysis there. David Hennig, there is the UK Director of the European Centre for International Political Economy. Remember, a friend of mine, senior civil servant in the Department of International Trade, as it then was, told me that Liz Truss liked trade deals to be condensed just to one side of A4. My friend said the problem with that is that trade deals can be a bit complicated. Hard to believe Liz Truss wouldn't have been across the detail. Mega Vegan says Trump is carrying out exactly what he campaigned on during the election. It's called democracy, unlike what happens in the UK and Europe. And let's take a call on this, actually, from Tony in Northampton, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Tony, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter.
Hi.
I'd just like to say, I was just watching that clip with Alicia, where you put that clip of Trump on. Yeah. You see his face? It was full of hatred and anger. And I was just reading his face, and I thought, you didn't want to deal with this Labour government and his crew that has slagged you off to high heaven. He's done this. Well, we don't know what Donald Trump is thinking, and he's just done the trade deal. So, I mean, maybe he's happy. Yes, maybe he's happy, but I think he deliberately went out his way to screw Starmer and his mob up over Europe, so he can't go back to Europe. He's deliberately done this. So you think this is to prevent us going back into the EU? Yeah, exactly. Okay. So, yeah. Why do you think that? I mean, obviously Trump hates the EU and always has, but I mean, you could argue actually that we have a better chance of a better trade deal because we're a single country rather than being part of the EU. So actually, maybe it's more a positive thing. Yeah, but it's common knowledge. He had to go one way or the other way. He couldn't go to the EU or Europe at the same time. This is not viable. So Trump has got in there, and the EU is going to be very, very angry with this So he can't go to the EU anymore and get closer to the EU because he's already gone to India and America. So he has got nowhere to turn now. He has to go in alignment with India and the free world.
Well, we'll see what happens in future. Tony, thanks for your thoughts on that. Appreciate that. Joanna in Salisbury says, "Hi, Cardi P. I think more discipline in schools would be amazing. Military training, saluting the flag wouldn't go amiss. Respect for teachers and quiet classes wouldn't go amiss either. Autistic children like regularity and quiet. They struggle with the chaos and rudeness in our schools." That is something I worry about, all of that, the lack of a lot of discipline, routine, rote learning, the things that, I mean, just when I was in school, you just wouldn't raise your voice in a class. If you're told to be quiet, you would be. I'm not sure that's the case anymore. And just on this story about the man who burned the Quran facing charges for harassing Islam, Sandra says, "I'm just curious, but if a Muslim burned the Bible, would they be charged too?" Well, in fairness to the Crown Prosecution Service, they have said that we charge this person on the basis that his actions caused harassment, alarm or distress, which is a criminal offence, and that it was motivated by hostility towards a religious or racial group. As part of our continuous review of ongoing cases, we concluded the wording of the charge was incorrectly applied, and we have substituted a new charge to more accurately reflect the alleged offence. Well, we'll be talking about that a little bit later on, but there are people worried that there are blasphemy laws by the back door. We haven't had those for 20 years in this country. I don't want them now. I want religious freedom, but I also want freedom of speech. We are, of course, the home of free speech. Let me know what you think of any of these different questions, any of these different issues. Let me know your thoughts. Get on the air, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
He's not a MAGA Pope, right? And the fact that this would have already been known, I think that would have worked in his favour. So they would have thought, this is a good, and of course I'm assuming, I don't know what the cardinals are thinking, but they would have thought, this is a good foil for Donald Trump. We aren't going to get a MAGA Pope. But the fact that he was elected very quickly, or relatively quickly, I think shows that he also had managed to garner support from the Conservative faction as well.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Lord Timpson, James Timpson, is the prisons minister. He knows an awful lot about prisons because he has employed quite a number of former prisoners in his shops in Timpson's. Of course, many of us know that brand, and I've certainly bought a few keys and things from them, got a few keys cut there and so on. He's now the prisons minister because of all the work he has done. He was ennobled by Labour, and now he says that gangs are holding such an influence over jails, it keeps me awake at night. Well, David Shipley is a former prisoner in HMP Wandsworth. He's also a prisoner justice commentator and joins me in the studio now. Hi, David, thanks for coming in. What do you make of this? Should this keep James Timpson awake at night?
Yes, it should. I'm really glad, actually, that Lord Timpson has started to focus on this, because the reality is organised crime is spread throughout our prison system, and he talks about it corrupting officers, which absolutely is an issue. There's also been the corruption of prison governors, and in many cases the whole system is being influenced by serious organised crime. How
do they do it? How do they influence it?
A lot of the time it's money. You know, there are cases I'm aware of where, through quite careful means, organised crime have paid prison governors who have then been involved
Actual governors, people in charge of the prison. We're not talking about a few corrupt officers walking along corridors here. We're talking about people in charge of prisons.
Yeah, so I'm aware of a deputy governor at one London jail who was receiving building works done in his house, but he was paying massively under the odds for them, and the company that was doing the building work was linked to organised crime, and he was doing seemingly corrupt activities within the jail that he worked in, and that sort of behaviour does happen.
Blackmail is a way as well of getting people, of course?
I think it can be, yes, and I think is once someone has been corrupted once, they own them. You know, then they can't step it back, and it's a very, very dangerous situation.
And in terms of gangs themselves, how much are gangs around prisons? I mean, is it a matter of going into prison and then saying, are you going to join a gang? Are you going to obey what a gang does necessarily? They're the ones with the authority in many cases, rather than the prison authorities in the loosest sense of the word themselves.
You do get some of that, but what's also more insidious and I think more dangerous in lots of ways is that in lots of jails, so I saw this in Wandsworth, there was one wing where all the senior organised crime gang prisoners were. So this is not the roadmen, this is not the guys on the streets, this is the guys who direct the operations. And that wing was very quiet and very peaceful, and it was a wing that staff liked working on because there was never any trouble, because you know, people who are doing 20 years for heroin importation aren't going to pick a fight with an officer. But actually, the people on that wing were directing a lot of the drugs trade and the contraband trade across the rest of the jail. So
and how were they in the same area together? Were they choosing to be there? Were they saying, I want to be in the nice quiet wing? What was happening there?
Well, this is the issue, and often lots of people argue that actually we should separate out organised crime gang people and put them on almost in the way we treat terrorists, keep them away. So you'll have situations where, you know, people are charming and persuasive and get onto the quiet wing, they're a bit older, they're calm. But also you get situations where prison governors have operated almost jails within jails. There was a wing on Wandsworth a few years ago, K1, where all the OCG guys, organised crime guys, ended up, and they were allowed out of the cell all the time. And at one point security swept it, and there were bags full of mobile phones, bottles of rosé wine, all sorts of stuff that was found because they were being allowed that by the staff.
I mean, where do you even start to try to deal with that? The prisons minister is saying that it keeps them awake at night, and you're saying it should. I agree with you. But how do you even, especially when you have so many inexperienced officers, but also we have very experienced officers who are being corrupted as well?
I think it's a leadership issue. We need to look beyond even prison governors. We need to look at the leadership at Petty France. There are people...
That's the Ministry of Justice headquarters, where I used to work there,
Yes, so there are people who are very senior within the civil service who have turned a blind eye to this kind of corruption for many years, have not confronted it, and when they uncover that governors are corrupt, they often try to handle it in a quiet way. You know, the people are sacked in a discreet fashion, no fuss is made. We need to tear back, you know,
I mean, it's criminal what they're doing. It's not a competence issue. It's not about saying, well, you've broken the terms of your contract. Sorry, we're sacking you. This is something that is facilitating organised crime. I mean, this is really, really serious.
Yeah, and I believe there's a real reluctance within the Ministry of Justice to actually confront the reality of that.
Okay, very, very interesting. Okay, well, we'll talk more about this as time goes on. I want to ask you now about pupils being given military training to instill discipline, to restore national pride and get them fitter. This is a survey. Many voters think that this is something that should be done. What do you think?
I think national pride comes from having a country to feel proud of. And I think for many young people today, there's not a lot to feel proud of in this country. You know, we don't treat our people well. It's not a country where if you work hard and earn money, you can buy a house, unless you've got incredible amounts of wealth. It's not a country where being law-abiding is rewarded. Often, you know, you see all the time people talking about how they get on the tube and they see 3 or 4 guys jumping the barriers, nothing happens, but they tap in and they feel like idiots. So
I ask this question all the time. What is the reward for following the rules? I'm not saying people shouldn't follow the rules. I'm saying what is the reward for doing so? But this is, pupils should be given military training. According to half of people telling pollsters, they want to see the combined cadet force operate in more schools. We had CCF in my school, and I'll be brutally honest, it was a small number of people, maybe 20 or 30. They really enjoyed it. They were often seen as sort of a bit strange for wanting to do this. To be honest, they did their, they laid wreaths and things on Remembrance Day, which is very nice. But unless you really want to join the military and go and fly planes in the RAF, for example, what would the sort of point of that be? But the New Britain project said Britain's young people need more than just lessons. They need pride, purpose and real opportunities to lead. Cadets aren't a silver bullet, but they are a practical, proven way to really build confidence and belong to our schools. I know a young man who's 20 years old who really wants to join the RAF. He's done cadets and really enjoyed it, and it certainly helped him. But I wonder, is that if you don't want to be there in the first place, if this is just something that you're told to do, well, how is it going to help you?
I completely agree. I think for kids who really want to be in the cadets or the scouts or whatever it might be, or want to do Duke of Edinburgh, those things are great. But if you force kids to do it, they're going to hate it, and they'll spoil it for the kids who really want to be there. I think it comes back to, if you want people to care about their country and to feel inspired by their country, we've got to make it a country that is actually inspiring, and a country that offers them real opportunities, not forces them to participate in the cadets.
David, there's an interesting story around today from Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary. He says claims against a man who is charged with essentially blasphemy as a threat to free speech. This is a man who burned a copy of the Quran. He's been charged with harassing Islam, and Robert Jenrick says this is a backdoor to blasphemy law. I know you've been writing about this for The Spectator. Of course, probably the most famous blasphemy controversy was around Salman Rushdie, the Satanic Verses in 1988. Ayatollah Khomeini issued the fatwa calling for Rushdie's death. There were no charges, of course, because the law only protects the Christian beliefs at that time. We haven't had a blasphemy law for 18 years in this country. Michael Newman, a secondary school science teacher, was arrested under England's blasphemy law previously for selling a blasphemous video called Visions of Ecstasy. And it was a short film directed by Nigel Wingrove. The film features a sexualised scene of St. Teresa with the body of Jesus on the cross. I am not for blasphemy. I don't want to go around burning Qurans or burning Bibles. But this person who burned burned a Quran has been charged under the Public Order Act.
Yeah, and what's really terrifying is the first charge that was laid against him essentially presented the religion of Islam as a person, a legal person which had been offended by him. And this makes no sense in English law. You can't define a religion as a person, but that's what this charge did. And it's only, I believe, because Robert Jenrick and the Free Speech Union and the National Secular Society and other people have made a lot of noise about this, that today the CPS have announced they've adjusted the charge. They're still saying they believe he committed a crime, but now they're charging him under a different public order charge. The point here, though, is that it's been the work of centuries in this country to make this a place where people don't have to be afraid of offending someone's religious sensibilities. They don't have to be worried about going to prison because they've offended a religious belief. And that's a good thing. I agree. I wouldn't go out deliberately choosing to hurt people's feelings about their religious beliefs, but I don't think it should be illegal.
Yes.
And it is.
And it comes down to the fundamental principle, I would argue, of free speech, but also that no one has the right not to be offended. I could say your jacket offends me. You could say my shirt offends you, for example. That so what? Doesn't matter. Get on with your life. As you say, not many people are going to go around burning Qurans, and nor should they. But a lawyer, Akur Reindorf, said it was plainly defective because the religious institution of Islam was not a person, as you correctly said. Jenrick has written, Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, has written in the Daily Telegraph today. He says, burning the Quran, like any religious text, is something that some people find very offensive and few people would condone, but that's not the point. There are many things in our society that people find offensive, but that doesn't make them criminal. Parliament abolished blasphemy almost 20 years ago. They were right to do so. It is not for the Crown Prosecution Service or courts to create a blasphemy law in this country by the back door. Do you feel that's what happened here?
I think it might.
Or the attempt, anyway.
And I think Robert Jenrick has very rightly called for the Chief Inspector of the CPS to actually investigate this. And we know about this case because it's got public attention. There's been lots of support for this man. We need to understand, has this happened before? Is this a regular practice? Because in many cases, if someone's charged with something and they arrive at the magistrate's court with little resource, they rely on the duty solicitor, they're probably just pleading guilty. And if CPS lawyers are regularly drafting charges which define the religion of Islam as a person, that's wrong. It's against the will of Parliament, and it's against the values of this country, and we need to know if that's happening.
Conspiracy or cock-up, what's your gut on this?
I find it very hard to understand how an experienced lawyer could draft a charge that is so antithetical to the law and principles of this country. So I think,
especially when they're the Crown Prosecution Service. You know, this is not some sort of gonzo barrister doing some sort of random bit of litigation. Not that I would have interviewed any of those, obviously, over the past few weeks. But in terms of the Crown Prosecution Service, they're the guys who are the public prosecutors here.
Yes, exactly. So it's very hard to understand how this has happened. I think we need to have an accounting for that.
Okay, very, very interesting. What do you think about what David has just said? Should we be charging people for burning the Quran? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Should we have military discipline in schools, and do gangs in prisons keep you up late at night? We've covered a lot in the last 10 or 15 minutes. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk a little bit more about this with a Liberal Democrat activist, believe it or not, who is on David's side of this argument, and very keen to speak to you too. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Sorry, I've just been handed another story by the producer here. It's all happening thick and fast here on the programme today. The BBC quietly edited an episode of Question Time after an allegation making a false claim about net zero. And this Richard Tice, the Reform UK deputy leader, appeared on Thursday night's panel show, and during the show, which was recorded before a live audience but broadcast later. I used to work on Question Time. I was a senior producer there when I was 27, and they record it first and then they edited it a little bit and then put it out about later in the evening. They recorded about sort of 8:30 or something like that. Richard Tice was asked about his party's position on climate change policies, which he said was to scrap net stupid zero. In the debate, Fiona Bruce, the host, intervened to correct Mr. Tice on the proportion of carbon emissions that are man-made. He said that it was about 3 or 4%. And then Fiona Bruce said, according to NASA, it's actually about a third. He said that he approached a BBC editor after the show to tell him the statistic was a mistake, informed the information to come from BBC Verify, the broadcaster's fact-checking unit. The exchange with Bruce was then edited out of the programme, but the BBC has not reflected this in the show uploaded to the iPlayer. The BBC said the segment was edited out because the two statistics were compared, which were not directly comparable, and there more context would be needed to explain the two statistics sufficiently. Guess what? Richard Tice was right, and Fiona Bruce, who's paid mega bucks to get it right as the presenter of BBC Question Time, was wrong. So there we are. Hard to believe there that BBC Verify didn't get into Fiona Bruce's brain. I'm sure she would say she does a professional job, but but now Zia Youssef, who is the chairman of Reform UK, says that BBC Verify should be named BBC Guesswork. Very interesting. The unit has 61 people who have a combined salary of 3.3 million. I mean, my point about journalism, should you need a Verify unit? I mean, surely all journalists verify facts all the time. You check things and you put context on things and you realise you need a whole unit for it. Fact checking, very, very interesting sort of thought. And also, when they get it wrong, who fact checks the fact checkers? And who fact checks the fact checkers of the fact checkers? That's what I want to know. Anyway, let's talk more about this man who burned the Quran, facing charges for harassing Islam. Matthew Hulbert is a Liberal Democrat activist and political commentator. Matthew, this is an interesting one, isn't it? You're a Liberal Democrat activist. You certainly believe in free speech. We like your free speech, or some people don't like it, but we certainly allow you to have it on the station from time to time. This man, and indeed Robert Jenrick, claiming it's a threat to free speech. I know Tim Farron, your former party leader at the Liberal Democrats, has spoken about this as well.
Absolutely. Great to be with you, Peter. Good afternoon to you and your viewers and listeners. Yeah, it's interesting, this, isn't it? I mean, my view is, as not just a Liberal Democrat, but as a kind of philosophical Liberal, is that blasphemy laws are deeply illiberal. But what I'd also say is that free speech comes with responsibility. And my view is that you shouldn't deliberately go out to offend. And I think the burning of religious texts, religious books, is a deeply provocative act that is always going to, and perhaps rightly, upset quite a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't disagree with a single word you've said there. And I personally don't go around, burning copies of religious texts because I don't want to offend people who have religious views that are different to me. I'm agnostic. Well, I used to be agnostic. Now I'm not so sure. But the question I think we have in regard to this, and so many people will have this question, is if someone burned a Bible or a Torah or another religious text or a hymn book, would this have gone the way it has gone? Now we don't know that. That's a what if. But the Crown Prosecution Service has screwed up here. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, I agree with you. And I don't think this should ever have reached the courts. But having said that, I think this individual shouldn't have done what he apparently did. And so, I'm a Christian, you're an agnostic, we have atheists, we're a multidimensional country. But again, I repeat that I don't think we should go out of our way to... No,
I agree with you, but nonetheless, if someone reports this to the police, what they say is, well, I'm very sorry that happened and I'm very sorry you're offended, but there's no crime here, there's nothing to see, I'm afraid you've got to move on here.
I absolutely agree, and there's no right not to be offended. But I think burning religious texts, it's not very good. It might not be illegal, but I'd rather people didn't do it.
No, I totally agree with you. It's interesting, the Crown Prosecution Service, just to give them their say, they say, we charge this man on the basis that his actions caused harassment, alarm or distress, which is a criminal offence, and that this was motivated by hostility towards a religious or racial group. As part of our continuous review of ongoing cases, we concluded the wording of the charge was incorrectly applied, and we have substituted a new charge to more accurately reflect the alleged offence. I don't know why they didn't just say, I'm terribly sorry we got this wrong, now we're charging him with something else.
Yeah, I mean, I think they should probably drop it. But having said that, I do think this person should be given a bit of a talking to in saying that. Well,
but why? I mean, you can have an exchange as a human being and say, do you know what, mate? I wouldn't go around doing that, and that's fine. but also, if it's not a crime, who has the authority to give him a talking to?
I mean, I guess I'm suggesting what you've just said there, that, you know, a bit of a on the QT word that, come on.
From whom,
fella,
though? From whom, though?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I hope that his friends might say, come on, chap, you know, this is a bit, whatever your view, and you can, you know, we're not the thought police, you can hold what view that you want, but actually burning religious texts that people consider to be sacred is just not the right thing to be doing.
Okay, Matthew, thank you. That's Matthew Hilbert there, a political commentator and Liberal Democrat activist. This person says on WhatsApp, if a person can be charged with an offence for burning a Quran, then surely the chants and placards of anti-Semitism are chargeable. Well, yeah, I mean, not under religious hatred legislation, if you're anti-Semitic and if you're promoting Hamas or Hezbollah. I mean, that's illegal, certainly. And yeah, I'm certainly in favour of that. But burning a Quran by itself is not a criminal offence. Linda in London has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Linda, what do you make of this?
I personally don't think it was the wisest thing to do.
Agreed.
However, I think that potentially, if this was done, so my understanding of the law is it would be a criminal offence if it was done to cause alarm or distress to a specific person. So if this was done outside the house of a Muslim family, you could argue absolutely the only reason that's being done is
because that hypothetical family would have been targeted specifically by this.
Absolutely, or even outside a mosque, because again, the only reason to do that would be to cause alarm, harassment or distress. That would be the only reason. Now, my understanding is this was outside the Turkish embassy. Now, there are potential offences because setting fires in public places is actually against the law anyway, but it's the charge that's the problem, because how can you be hateful towards an institution?
Yeah,
I didn't think that was part of UK law.
And the person who's been charged here says that his display was a protest against Erdogan, the Turkish president, and an act of solidarity with a person called Salman Momaka, who's an Iraqi refugee who was assassinated in Sweden in January after burning Qurans in repeated public protests. I mean, the point is that we don't have blasphemy laws in this country, and the government in fact last year explicitly ruled out reintroducing blasphemy laws. This is Tahir Ali, who's a Labour MP, asked Keir Starmer to commit to introducing measures to prohibit the desecration of all religious texts and prophets of the Abrahamic religions, and that was said, no, we're not doing that because we haven't had blasphemy laws in the last 20 years. Linda, call me a cynic, I wonder if someone had been burning a Bible or burning the Torah, whether this or any other religious text, whether this would have got to the stage it got to within the Crown Prosecution Service, who have not said we were wrong and have not apologised for this. They've basically said, oh, we're charging him with something else now.
Yeah, well, that was, yes. So I would like to think, if like the case that I said earlier, that it was somebody specifically targeted, if somebody specifically a church or a Christian family, I would very much hope that they would be charged.
Yes.
But again, if somebody is setting fire to a Bible in a form of protest, you could argue that it's a public order offence, but it's not. Again, we don't have blasphemy laws. And one thing I am a bit confused about is I looked it up, and it seems to me they're changing the wording of the charge. Because
they are.
Yeah, so what is that being changed to? Do you know?
Well, they are now saying, as they've said in their statement, that they are conclude the wording of the charge, when correctly applied, to more accurately reflect the alleged offence, but on the basis that his actions cause harassment, alarm or distress, which is the criminal offence. So they clearly think there's something in this. Well, I don't know.
Who's made the complaint? Has a member of the public made a complaint?
He's being charged anyway. We'll find that out. Robert Jendricks tweeted about it, and we'll get that tweet, and we'll find out the full detail of this. But something doesn't quite add up about this, Linda, and I do worry that there are some religions in this country that are given more protection than others.
Well, we know that Christians are being arrested for for praying in public. We know that's happening. I am a Christian, and I do find sometimes when you hear these public preachers, I sometimes think, oh my goodness, why out of everything in the Bible are you preaching that? What a wally. There is so much more in the Bible that you could be preaching.
Yes.
We shouldn't be preaching hate regardless of whether it's in the Bible or not. But I do think that if we're going to say that this is blasphemy, then why are we saying that people can't pray in public?
I've just found the charge sheet, the original charge sheet that Robert Jenrick has tweeted here. I'm just reading this off my phone here, Linda. And this is contrary to Section 31B and 4 of the Crime and Disorder Act 1998. On the 13th of February in the city of Westminster, blah, 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 with intent to cause alarm against the religious institution of Islam, harassment, alarm or distress displayed some writing, sign or other visible representation which was threatening, abusive or insulting, thereby causing that or another person harassment, alarm or distress, and the offence was religiously aggravated within the terms of Section 28 of the Crime and Disorder Act 1998. It's essentially saying that religion is a person and Islam has been offended by this. Right. I mean, that's not correct. And just because...
That's like saying because I'm a Christian, I should be offended because somebody's been sacked for wearing a cross. I should automatically be offended by that. Well, no, maybe I won't be. Maybe I wouldn't be.
Do you know what? I was very frustrated with a member, well, someone I know very well, shall we say, on one occasion, who is a deeply, deeply Christian person. Her Christianity is the most important thing in her life. And I said, I'm just going to say what I said, oh, for God's sake. And that deeply, deeply offended that person when I was frustrated when I said that. It deeply offended her. Now, most people, it wouldn't raise an eyebrow. No. I'm sure I've heard that 3 or 4 times in the office so far this afternoon for people just saying things for whatever reason. It certainly doesn't offend me, but it offends that person. And this is the point, isn't it? It's offence. Nobody has the right not to be offended, Linda, and it worries me.
She has the right to be offended, but you have the right to offend.
Yeah.
Yeah. And where it crosses the line is when you are taking that to another level. So if you're deliberately targeting somebody and you're deliberately hounding someone with, I don't know, emails or
some form of harassment,
them, then it crosses a line. But you are allowed. I don't like being offended. I don't like offending people, but we're allowed to do it. Whether it's nice, whether it's morally right is a different question. But legally, I'm allowed to offend you.
Linda, thank you very much. You haven't offended me at all this afternoon. You've made an awful lot of sense there. That is Linda in London. And Jenrick is actually, Robert Jenrick has actually updated that and said the Crown Prosecution Service have dropped the charge of causing alarm to the religious institution of Islam. This was an invention that had no basis in law, but the updated charging decision is still concerning. We must resist attempts to introduce blasphemy laws by the back door, says Robert Jenrick. We'll put a call out to him and see if he can come on between now and 7 o'clock. I don't know if he's free this afternoon, but we'll ask Robert Jenrick if he can perhaps come on and talk about this. Thanks to Mike in Lincoln, who says, I'm aghast at your Liberal Democrat commentator Matthew telling us that with free speech comes responsibility when it comes to the burning of the Quran. This is a legitimate form of protest against what, in the face of it and under any other reasonable measure, has some of the most barbaric, murderous adherents who lack all sense of proportion or indeed restraint. The Crown Prosecution Service are making yet more blasphemy laws by the back door, and this has to stop, says Mike in Lincoln. More of your views on this after the break. Stay with us here on Talk.
Pope, right? And the fact that this would have already been known, I think that would have worked in his favour. So they would have thought, this is a good, and of course I'm assuming, I don't know what the cardinals were thinking, but they would have thought this is a good foil for Donald Trump. We aren't going to get a MAGA Pope. But the fact that he was elected very quickly, or relatively quickly, I think shows that he also had managed to garner support from the Conservative faction as well.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, we'll get back to the burning of the Quran story in just a second, but it's time now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning a weekend away in Munich at the end of May to watch the biggest game in European football, the Champions League final. Thanks to your colleagues at Talk Sport, we're also putting £5,000 in your pocket to spend however you want. I wish I could enter this.
Win a once-in-a-lifetime trip to watch the Champions League final live. Go to talksport.com/win for your chance to embark on the ultimate odyssey of football ecstasy. With 2 tickets to the Champions League final live at the iconic Munich Football Arena, Germany, including flights, accommodation, and an uber-massive £5,000 in your hand. How about that? Enter online now at talksport.com/win. Terms and conditions apply. Achtung, baby.
18 plus, UK, excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win all of that, simply text the word football to 83338 by the 16th of May at 11 p.m. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, or send your name and number by post to Champions League final competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 21st of May. This is a TalkSport limited competition run on TalkSport Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Lots more on this controversy about burning the Quran. Those specific charges have been dropped, of course. The CPS has said that. And the charge has now been replaced with an offence under Section 5 of the Public Order Act, which criminalises using words or behaving in a disorderly manner or displaying material that is likely to harass, intimidate and distress others. The penalty is a maximum fine of £2,500. Neil has been in touch and says, what part of we live in a free and democratic country? If I want to burn a Quran, if we live in a free country, I should be able to. You cannot give offence. You can only take it. Strange, it's only the alleged peaceful religion of Islam that gets offended. Well, was it offended or was it not, and how can it be, as it's a concept rather than a person? Ed in Cornwall says, I seem to remember the Union flag being burned at a protest by some people along with the poppy. Were any of these people charged under the same laws? I don't recall that ever happening, says Ed in Cornwall. Daniel's in Shropshire and has given me a ring on this, 0344 499 1000. Daniel, what are your thoughts on this?
The problem with this blasphemy law is it's the same with every, well, I say blasphemy law, it's the same with every single hate crime act. And that is, if you look at every single hate crime act and the public order offence, they all contain 2 parts, and that is inciting or threatening violence, which we all agree should always be an offence, and is an offence on its own anyway.
Yeah.
Then it contains speech or publications that cause alarm, harm or distress. That entire line essentially says, if you hurt somebody's feelings, it is a criminal offence. And the moment that was implemented, anything that anybody said would be a criminal offence.
Yeah, because you can interpret absolutely anything. You can interpret me saying the sky is blue as something which could cause alarm, harm or distress.
The thing is, though, hurting people's feelings should never be an offence. Not only that, it's how do you even prove that? If you're in a court and somebody says, this person's post caused me anxiety, okay, well, how do you prove that it caused you anxiety? You can't see anxiety. There's no way to prove it. And we live in a country where crimes are, what's the word? What's the wording of it? Beyond reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
How can you prove people's feelings without, I mean, the only real way you could do that is by hooking the person up to a brain scan and showing them the offensive material.
Well, it's a very, very fair point, Daniel. I mean, this should never have happened in the first place, should it?
No, but this is the other thing. You look at the hate crime laws as well, especially the Race and Religious Hatred Act. It states that you can offend religion, but you can't offend Muslims. No, not so much that. So, for example, you can offend Islam. It's illegal. That's freedom of speech. But offending Muslims is illegal. You can't offend one without offending the other.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, you can offend Muslims. People do offend Muslims all the time, and members of many other religions as well. The point is, I suppose, are criminal charges actually going to be brought against you in that instance?
That's the thing, though. The moment you hear, again, it comes back to that alarm, harm or distress.
Yeah.
If you've caused alarm, harm or distress, that is being offensive. Yeah. It is a criminal offence. Therefore, offending people is a criminal offence.
But how likely are you to actually be charged with that? And, you know, this person who has been in this is another matter.
Likely.
But, yeah.
Very during the riots.
Well, we know that, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, during the riots, how many people were... And I'm not on about the ones who were incited violence. Like I said, that's always wrong. But people who just said things like who the Allah and things like that. Well, that's blasphemy. But But people were still put in prison for offending Muslims then.
It's a very, very interesting point, Daniel, and thanks for it. Daniel's given us a ring there on 0344 499 1000. Stephen's in Cambridgeshire and wants to have his say on this as well. Stephen, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter.
Hi.
Yeah, it's just about, the guys getting or attempted to be prosecuted for burning the Quran.
Yeah.
How many imams that I've seen on X that are in British mosques have been prosecuted for inciting violence against the British people?
Some of them have, but not nearly enough. And there's some very totally peaceful imams. I've met many of them, I've interviewed them. There's no issue there. Problem. But there are many who are very radical and should be brought under the force of the law.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It's funny how it's always one-sided. It's always like, I think the actual judiciary are being captured by the extreme left wing.
I think there are an awful lot of decisions that the judiciary have made, and certainly Baroness Sue Carr, who's the Lady Chief Justice, has made a number of decisions that I am really worried about, Stephen, and I do worry about the judiciary in this country.
Yeah. It needs to be brought to account, and then they wonder why the rise of reform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
it just beggars belief. But the guy, it was probably the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, neither of us, Stephen, are going to go around burning a Quran. We're not going to do that because that's not something that we do, and it's not a nice thing to do. But should it be illegal? No.
No, but I also want to see when every day you go on X, there's a different imam on there in a British...
very, very clear on all of that in terms of that. Thank you very much for your thoughts, Stephen. Appreciate your views on that. Keep them coming. 0344 499 1000. This is the man who burned a Quran, who did face charges, now dropped, but the charges were brought, and that's what we're annoyed about, for harassing Islam, as if Islam is a person. Robert Jenrick's been talking about it, the Shadow Justice Secretary. Lots to discuss in the next hour. We'll talk about that trade deal as well. Let us know your thoughts on that and whether children should be given military discipline in schools. Loads to discuss this Friday evening. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. Loads to talk about, including the man who was charged with sort of a blasphemy law for burning the Quran. Lots of people very annoyed about that. We're talking about the trade deal with the United States. What is it? When does it actually become law? When's it being implemented? The deputy to the Chancellor of the Exchequer didn't seem to know when it was actually going to become enacted. We'll talk to a top US commentator who's in the studio with us. Also some breaking news in that the head of the Royal Navy has been suspended over a secret affair with a subordinate alleged, as the married dad of three faces a misconduct probe. We'll get into that as well. We'll also talk about the fact that there is a plan for military discipline in schools. Is that something you think our young people should be subjected to, or should be encouraged to do? We'll have a sport update this hour as well from our colleagues over at Talk Sport. And of course we want to make sure that your views get on the air as much as possible between now and 7 o'clock. This is my show, but it's your show too. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell, or remember, the main number does three things. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please, and we'll get those played out, or you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. So many ways to do it, no excuse not to do it. Anytime between now and 7, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk. Brad in Cambridgeshire says, I am not particularly religious, but I am deeply patriotic. When these people burn the Union flag or the flag of St George, will they be prosecuted for deeply offending me and many others, says Brad in Cambridgeshire. Leslie also says, hi Peter, are we better off with this US deal than we were before Trump gained power? Two big questions there, and Michael Yaki is with me. He's a US political analyst, a former senior advisor to the Speaker of Congress, Nancy Pelosi. Michael, great to see you in the flesh. How are you doing?
Well, you know, after you recited all the ways to contact you, I figured the only way to do it would be to barge in your studio and just do it myself.
Well, I'm very glad you've done so, Michael. It's always good having a yak with Yaki. Tell me, first of all, actually, before we get into the trade deal, we're talking just that's what we'll do most of our discussion about, but flag desecration is a crime in America, isn't it?
Yeah, there's an actual law that says you can't desecrate the flag. Now, what that actually means has been a subject of a lot of discussion. Flag burning seems to be sort of, okay, that's flag desecration. But it gets a little squishy when you start thinking about the fact that people have cut up flags for years to make, you know, capes, bikinis, superhero suits. I mean, because it's about the integrity of the flag as a whole. So, you know, it's one of those things that lawyers try not to get too involved in, and judges try not to get too involved in as well. But it is there. It's always been a long-standing law of the United States. But that's a far cry from burning a religious item, which in the United States, as abhorrent as it may be, is essentially protected by the First Amendment.
There are sort of, not quite rules, but there are guidelines out there in terms of there are so many Americans who used to live in America for a short time, about a year and a half, and there's so many Americans who have their flag outside their front door, and it should be lit and things like that. It should be of a good quality. You can't just have a sort of threadbare flag as well.
It can't be touching the ground, all sorts. There are a lot of rules regarding it. The fact is that no one really enforces it unless you basically provoke someone to do it. You know, if you take a flag, march to the White House and set it on fire in front of a guard, you're probably going to get arrested for flag desecration.
Goodness,
but other than that, it's rarely enforced, and only enforced when you want to make a political point about burning the flag.
Well, very, very interesting. We're talking, of course, about this person who burned the Quran. There are worries that he's been charged. The charges have now been dropped, and he's been charged with something else, but there are worries that the Crown Prosecution Service exceeded its brief. They haven't apologised for that, but they've said that they got the charge wrong and are putting a different charge against that man. We'll talk more about that as the show goes on, including with Philip Ingram, who's a former senior military intelligence officer. We'll talk to him later, and there's some calls coming in on that as well. We'll make sure you have your say on 0344 499 079 1000. Michael, the reason we invited you into the studio was to talk about this trade deal.
Sure.
The deputy to Rachel Reeves, our finance minister, our chancellor, doesn't seem to know when it'll actually be enforced. There's a lot of what ifs around this, aren't there?
No, there are a ton of what ifs, and I mean, in fact, you have to think to yourself, if the legs of the Champions League had been reversed and the Prime Minister had been at Islington for the game instead of being where it was reachable by the President, would we even have a deal at all right now anyway?
That's right.
So I mean, all we do know is that 90 days all the tariffs have been basically put on hold anyway, except for the ones on the auto, and the auto one obviously is very important to the UK because of Land Rovers. Americans love Land Rovers.
Yeah, Jaguar Land Rover is a big British company, and it's most affected by this, isn't it?
And that $100,000 exemption from the 25% tariff pretty much takes care of them, although it kind of sets a ceiling on how much they can sell. If Americans all decided, I want a Jaguar Land Rover tomorrow, after 100,000, it goes up to 27% tariff. So I don't think they know. And I think the reason they don't know is because Trump does not know. I think Trump does not know because he hasn't bothered to figure out exactly when all this is actually going to occur. You have this 90-day stay on everything except a bunch. You have these. What you do know is that he desperately wanted an agreement. You know, the clock has been 36 days since Liberation Day. Peter Navarro, his trade advisor, was saying 90 deals in 90 days, and it's 36. And the UK was essentially low-hanging fruit from their point of view. The balance of trade was fairly even.
Yeah.
You know what comes.
It had been in the offing for such a long time.
Yeah, and
desired by both sides.
It's been a point of discussion for quite some time, and I think that the Prime Minister saw an opportunity here, but he had to do it, the Trump way. He had to offer a state visit. He had to make sure he called him lots of times and offered help on other items, including prosecuting the guys who defiled the golf course in Scotland, things like that. But this is an administration that has been notoriously short on details and execution. So the issue is going to be, I think, for the Prime Minister and his team, is forcing the actual execution to go forward, because every day that the 25% tariff is still in place, and I think it still is, that's another Jaguar or Land Rover
that's not being sold. I wonder what your advice to Keir Starmer would be as a seasoned political operative. Get it done quickly, but also, if you don't get it done quickly, there's risk in a lot of that as well, presumably, because things could go wrong, Trump could change his mind. The volatility of Trump, the fact that he does change his mind, and that's factual, that's not a criticism, it is something that Keir Starmer, who calls himself Mr. Rules, I mean he's not, but he calls himself Mr. Rules and wants that certainty, and businesses want certainty as well. So there's a heck of a lot of, I come back to my original question, just so many what ifs within this and a lack of certainty.
I think that the ambassador, Peter Mandelson, is going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting to get the attention back of the people in Lutnick in the Trade Representative's office to
will they sort of want to, sorry to interrupt you, will they sort of want to say, this is done, off you go, on to the next one?
No, I think what they don't want to see happen is for this to blow up. Because again, this is about the world economy that everyone's worried about. We know that Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is probably really watching it, and that may be the back door to sort of make sure this thing gets done, because his eye is on the world markets, and he knows that if this deal were to blow up, because it's not happening, because Land Rover all of a sudden says, I can't do this. If BA were to say, well, that those 32 Boeing jets we were going to buy, we're going to do it at 10 at a time. These kinds of things that could happen. It's in their interest to get this nailed down, because all the other countries are going to want to see, is this just hot air, or is this going to be a real commitment? And when the Prime Minister of England, Great Britain, says it's done, they'll see it as done. They're not going to believe
Yeah.
They're not going to believe the President of the United States.
Sure. And that's a fascinating position to be in. So the Americans are actually under some pressure here in this as well, in how they portray this to the rest,
they want
the
more
rest
deals.
of the world. Yeah.
They want to get them done.
Mm-hmm. We have many questions in terms of our political system. Keir Starmer and his acolytes haven't answered the question about whether Parliament is going to have a vote on this, whether there's going to be some ratification of this deal, and also because they don't know what the deal actually is. How do you see this kind of spinning out? I mean, you're talking about the different consequences, but what's your prediction?
I think that they just have to move. I think part of the issue is going to be the American bureaucracy, because one of the hidden parts of this deal that really didn't get talked about is the impact on China. The administration wants to use these trade agreements as a lever against China.
How will they do that?
For example, steel.
Can we get Michael a glass of water? Yeah, we'll get him a glass of water.
It was funny. I said, don't bring it in.
You don't need a glass of water. You always. Do you know what? I actually have not touched that. So you can have that one, and I'll take the one that our producer's got to bring in.
Thank you.
You can have that. So we're just talking to Michael Yaki.
I do a Marco
here.
Rubio drinking and go out there.
This is Michael Yaki here, U.S. political analyst, former senior advisor to the Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi.
So one of the key things is that they want to restrict the amount of China investment in anything that is being exported to the United States, whether it's steel, whether it's aluminum, whether it's components. So they want to do, it's called a Section 232 investigation, to determine whether or not there's too much China involvement in the host country in which the trade deal is being done. So that whole controversy about UK steel and everything like that, that's going to be one thing they're going to be taking a look at. And I think for the steel industry especially, understanding how much China investment still remains is going to be really key and essential for whether or not that tariff gets totally lifted or not.
So there's leverage in that as well. Really, really interesting. I wonder, just on a broader point in regard to Donald Trump. Certainly, do you think he's got past the scandal problem in regard to his national security advisor? Do you think that's old news now?
No. I think that more stuff is coming about his Secretary of Defense in terms of what he's. Apparently, his passwords were pretty breakable. They were online. It's there. It's festering. The U.S. media is going after it with tooth and claw. So we'll see. That kind of stuff is going to come out some more.
Just a final question, Michael. I'm going to take a guess that you're not Catholic.
I am.
You are Catholic?
I am.
Wow, okay. What do you make of the new Pope?
USA. No, I mean, just because you and I are in politics, we look at this and we go, this was a political choice.
Maybe they were guided by God.
True. God plays politics. And you have a situation where you have someone who was not quite as liberal as Francis, but believes in some of the core values of working with the poor and the downtrodden. Maybe not quite so LGBTQ friendly, but someone who exemplifies sort of the best parts of what people identify with Francis. That's what you have.
Interesting. A positive thing for
America?
A positive
thing? There's a lot of speculation about whether this was a thumb in the eye at Trump or not, because he's one of the most probably irreligious presidents we've ever had.
Although he says he wants to bring God back. He's talked about that. He's spoken to his religious base.
Was he talking about God? Is he talking about himself? I don't know. These are the kinds of things you got to worry about. But in terms of compassion for the poor, for immigrants, it's Prevost, now the Pope Leo, has been very outspoken on that. And people are wondering, is that a little bit of a...
And also, is he now going to be a more influential American than Donald Trump in many ways? Certainly in those types of debates. Anyway.
Well, the Catholic Church in America is undergoing a bit of a crisis in terms of whether or not the very hardcore, very conservative Catholics are nascent or ascendant in the church itself. So they're going to be looking at him and wondering how is this going to work out for them? But I think overall, it's good. I mean, I think that having someone who understands the politics of America.
Yeah, it's not going to be a bad thing.
And what he can do could be very influential.
Interesting. Michael, I actually went to Mass, believe it or not. I'm from a Methodist background in Northern Ireland, although I am agnostic. I have a friend who's Catholic, and I was in Notre Dame in Paris, actually, a few weeks ago, and went to see beautiful restored cathedral, obviously. And we went to Mass. Now, I obviously did not take communion, but I went to Mass with my friend.
You would have caught on fire.
Said, well, he said, my friend said, can we convert you? You know, can we perhaps persuade you to become a Catholic? And I said, no, the main reason I'm not going to become a Catholic is all the standing. There's just so much standing. You've got to stand up for a lot of the time. And really, in other religions, you get to sit down a bit more. And I said, you guys really put the stand in transubstantiation.
Well, on a different note, this one member of our family who was not Catholic said the reason they decided not to go with the Catholic faith is that when they added kneelers to the pews, it's like, why do you do kneelers? It should be hard.
It should be hard on your knees.
Hard on your knees.
Yeah.
You know, what's it? Catholicism is getting soft. So I mean, I was just at Notre Dame a few days ago as well.
Oh, right, it's an amazing building, isn't it? It's incredible.
And what they did to the restoration is just...
Do you know what, actually, some of the restoration, believe it or not, is wildly off topic, but apparently there were little imperfections in the design, and they kept those in because they wanted the restoration to be absolutely correct.
If you've been there before the fire and after the fire, the thing that is so different is how luminous the building is.
Yes.
It's like you took 6 centuries of candle smoke and scrubbed it off.
Got rid of it.
And you got rid of it. But and on that note, I'm sure that there are many Catholics in Great Britain who lit a candle for the trade agreement.
Well, we're tying it all together with Michael Yaki today. Loads to discuss. What do you think about what Michael has said? First of all, thank you very much for being in the studio with us. Something I hope will happen a bit more often now. Michael Yaki is a US political analyst and former senior advisor to Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, who was, of course, the Speaker of the House of Representatives for many years. Let us know your thoughts on all that he was talking about in this trade deal. Do you really think it is going to make a big difference? Leslie says Darren Jones, the sort of number 2 at the Treasury, Rachel Reese's deputy, couldn't even say when this US deal comes into force. And on Question Time, Sally's been in touch and says it's so biased these days, it's totally woke, a selected audience. I think Fiona Bruce is very rude and belittling to representatives from Reform UK or anyone from the right. The programme needs a total overhaul in my view, says Sally. This person says laws should be enforced for all, no matter of the faith. If they are scared, they should let them be scared. Louise says, in reference to the Crown Prosecution Service and the Quran burning, it's a pity that as much time and effort wasn't given to that poor teacher who was being threatened by Islamists in Yorkshire. I didn't see anyone in government, police, or the CPS standing up to a real criminal offence. Well, that person, I think that teacher, is still in hiding, Louise. Lots more to discuss. We'll talk to Philip Ingram in a second. He's a former senior military intelligence officer, because there has been some breaking news that the head of the Royal Navy, Admiral Sir Ben Key, he's been forced to step back as First Sea Lord, sending shockwaves through the Navy. It's the first time in 500 years of naval history in this country that a chief has faced a misconduct probe. We'll get all the details of that very, very soon. Stay with us here on Talk.
going to be
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, there has been a serious story that is rocking the Royal Navy. The head of the Royal Navy, Admiral Sir Ben Key, has been forced to step back as First Sea Lord because, well, there is he's been suspended over a secret affair with a subordinate. The married dad of three facing a misconduct probe. Philip Ingram is a former senior military intelligence officer. Philip, the first time in the Navy's 500-year history that its chief has faced a misconduct probe.
Well, yes. However, the behaviours in the Royal Navy and across defence have changed over the years, and this is possibly the sort of thing that 50, 100 years ago would not have been noticed in any way, shape or form, but now it is completely inappropriate. And of course, whenever Admiral Sir Ben didn't turn up to the Army and Navy match and didn't turn up to the Army and Navy rugby match at Twickenham and didn't turn up to the VE Day commemorations on Monday, the MOD put a statement out to say he'd stepped aside for personal reasons. Quite clearly, it's more than just personal reasons.
So something's been up for a while, hasn't it, Philip?
Yes, it's clear that there's an investigation going on. From what I understand, reading Jerome Starkey's scoop, that he's the defence editor with The Sun, that the Vice Chief of the Defence Staff, who's an Army General, Sharon Naismith, is leading the investigation into exactly what happened. It's, having affairs in the military, especially if it can break up families, is something that is frowned on.
Yes, certainly, and with a subordinate as well. If that in fact has happened, and these are allegations at the moment, that would be a serious thing as well. How has the military sort of changed over the years in regard to this? Because certainly, if you're in a relationship with someone who is your subordinate in the military, any branch of the military, does it have to be declared? What happens?
No, it doesn't have to be declared, and it's anecdotally, and I'll come at it from that perspective. There's always been different standards in the different services. If you're in a senior position and you use that position of influence to coerce a subordinate into a relationship or anything, then that has always been frowned on. But relationships between ranks have always existed, and unfortunately that has led to affairs between married individuals. In the Royal Navy, quite a few years ago, it was almost a badge of honour or a requirement for promotion that someone had the wife at home and a mistress somewhere else. That was not quite the same in the other, and I'm slightly tongue-in-cheek with that, but that's not quite the same in the other services as well. So standards have been focused and working to a single set of values and standards across defence. And of course, the head of the Royal Navy, the chiefs set the overall tone across the board, and for any of them to misbehave, then that does not bode well for the culture that they're supposed to be setting the standards for. Yeah, well, insert remark about a girl in every port. Admiral Key was first appointed First Sea Lord 4 years ago and repeatedly vowed to root out unacceptable sexual behaviour. Last year he declared zero tolerance for unacceptable behaviours, and in 2022 he said, "Those who do not wish to serve in accordance with the values and standards of life in the United Kingdom's armed forces will be removed. There is no place for you." Do you think he will come to perhaps regret those words if these allegations prove to be correct? Well, yeah, I think he will. Whenever he came into his appointment, he had inherited an issue with a crush depth rape list that had been found on submarines. This was where individuals had put a list of female sailors that they would want to rape if a submarine went below the crush depth and was going to be destroyed, in the ocean.
Horrendous.
And this came absolutely horrendous, and he carried out a full investigation into that. But the full details have still been kept quiet, and this came just after the similar thing with the Royal Air Force Red Arrows and inappropriate behaviours in the Red Arrows, and resulting in 2 pilots being sacked. And a number of others being disciplined. So this is an issue across defence, and when the defence chiefs are getting caught, then there's something wrong.
A Ministry of Defence spokesman said an investigation is ongoing and it would be inappropriate to comment at this time. Philip, I just want to ask you about a couple of other things. One is about this idea that people should be given military training to instill discipline, restore national pride and get them fitter. What do you make of that? Because we've spoken in the past, Philip, about things like conscription, and lots of people say, you've got 9 million people who are not working, some of them of course legitimately, some of them not. Get young people into conscript young people, train them up, the army will make a man or indeed a woman of you. But this is about pupils in schools.
Well, I don't think we should be giving necessarily military training to pupils in schools, but of course there are the combined cadet forces, the Army Cadet Force, the Air Force Cadets and the Royal Navy Cadets as well, which do give an element of military training that does instill discipline and values and standards and various other things. But you've also got that through the Scouting Association, through the Boys Brigade, the Girls Brigade, and
I was in the Boys Brigade, I was an anchor boy.
Exactly, other youth organisations, and I was in the Scouts, I was in the Cadets. I think it's something that brings a level of discipline and gives children the chance to go out and do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do, instead of, as we see today, sitting in front of a screen with a hand controller playing games. And I think it can only be a good thing if that happens. I think there's a bit of spin in the headlines to say military training, because that creates clicks for those kids that are sitting at home playing on their controllers.
Yeah. And can I ask you as well about this charge now dropped, or at least changed, about the man who burned the Quran, originally facing charges for harassing Islam? It's something that I find very, very concerning. What do you think?
Yeah. I think it's hugely concerning. The freedom of speech in this country is sacrosanct. We don't have blasphemy laws. If someone wants to burn a book, they can burn a book. I find it distasteful that anyone would want to burn, deface or destroy any religious text, whether I agree with all of the elements of that religion or not. But it's distasteful. It should not be illegal, and we have to protect our freedom of speech, provided it doesn't cross the line of encouraging terrorism or harm to anyone.
Philip, thanks for your thoughts on that. That's Philip Ingram, who is a former senior military intelligence officer. Thank you to him. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch. We'll take some of your calls after the break. If you want to get your voice on the air between now and 7 o'clock, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can send me a voice note as well if you want to on that same number, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I have some exciting news. On Sunday, I asked the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, a very simple question: how much has been spent on private healthcare since he became Health Secretary? So from July last year, in the last 10 months, how much of our money, as taxpayers' money, been spent on private healthcare? Really straightforward question. He didn't know the answer. I also wanted to know what it was as a proportion of the NHS budget. Is it 1%? Is it 10%? Is it 50%? What is it? So he didn't know the answer to that. We then followed that up with the Health Department. No answer, no answer, no answer. On Friday, we have, now bear in mind I asked this very simple question of the Health Secretary on Sunday, so we're now 5 days later, and a press officer has got back to me saying, my apologies for the delay on this one. We're pulling the data together with NHS England and we'll aim to get back to you on Monday with the latest data. So it's only going to take them 8 days to get back to us on a really simple question. Government efficiency in action, right there. That's the Department of Health press office working with their colleagues in NHS England, which are going to be merged together. Let's hope they can do things perhaps a little bit more quickly by Monday. I will bring you that. I won't be here on Monday. I will be off on Monday, but I promise you I will tweet it out. Let's talk about military discipline, something I was talking about there with Philip Ingram. Let us know your thoughts on that, 0344 499 1000. This is the idea that children should be given military discipline in schools to try to extend things like the combined cadet forces, for example, to other children to give them a better start in life and perhaps a bit more rigidity and discipline and order. David's in Gloucestershire and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000 on this. David, what would you like to say?
Well, Peter, I was just sort of thinking that I was a child of the 70s and I started off my education in private education, and basically, you know, you were disciplined quite hard in those days. You know, you didn't step out of line, you didn't dare, you know, and it's just got ridiculously the wrong way now. I mean, this, you know, nobody wants to see the old days of children being beaten or whatever.
No, of course not. But that's not what military discipline is it? It's not corporal punishment.
But my point is, the Liberal left has gone so far the other way. I mean, I got a nephew, and he actually frightens his own parents, or he did, as you know.
Yeah. There are a lot of parents are afraid of their kids. We talk about them. You know, how do you parent them? How do you discipline them? And a lot of parents are afraid of their kids.
But it's just gone ridiculously the wrong way, you know. That's my point, you know. I mean, back in my day, you know, you did have discipline. You know, you wouldn't have needed this, you know.
I'm not sure if you even said, right, every kid is going to be a member of the Combined Cadets Forces, or is going to do a bit of marching, or a bit of is going to learn a few military related things. I think you'd have a lot of resistance from the teachers as well.
Well, maybe, but like I said, I just think things have gone way too far the other way. That's my point, really.
So even if we tried this, it wouldn't work because there's no way back.
Well, no, I don't think there is. I think there's always a way back. You know, it's just got to start at the right age. I mean, I've got a 12-year-old, and I mean, I've been blunt. You know, I've never had. You know, I've only got to raise my voice, and she sits there and she listens. You know, and that's it.
Either of my parents, when I was a child, look, it was a different era. I'm 40 years old. It was a different era. But either of my parents, if they even so much as looked at me, I'd know to shut up and know not to say the right thing or to say the wrong thing. It was very clear. It was very clear who was in charge. They were my parents and not my friends. And they're my friends now, but they weren't my friends then, because their job was to parent. And I do wonder whether this would be a good idea. I just wonder how it could actually be implemented, David.
Well, I don't know, but, you know, I think what you was just saying about, you know, your parents are your friends, and I think there's too much of that, you know, to a degree. You know, your parents, you know, they've gone too far the other way, you know, maybe just a little, you know, not, like I said, you wouldn't want to go back to the bad old days where people were kids were beaten back and blue just because the parents were in a bad
No, and we don't want that to happen, and that's not the proposal here, David. But you make some really good points. I mean, how have you sort of managed to be a parent who is you know, at least from what you're telling us, are respected by your 12-year-old there?
Because you just got to be firm and fair. That's it. You know, I mean, unfortunately, I mean, you know, me and her mother don't live together, and I don't see her that often. But you know, she doesn't dare step out of line because, her mum will ring me up occasionally and say, you need to speak to her,
Yeah.
And,
And it's about parents, even though you don't love. Yeah. Even and it's as Mrs. Doubtfire says at the end of the film, just because your parents don't love you don't love each other anymore doesn't mean they don't love you, and you do love her, and it's part of that love that means discipline is actually part of that, because you want her to have a really really good life.
Yeah, but she's up. I'm very lucky. She's as good as gold, and I don't think I've had to, I haven't spoken to her for probably nearly 3 years now, if the truth be known, because
told her off. Yeah. Well, listen, I long may that continue well into her teenage years, David. Hopefully. Thanks, David. Appreciate that. Donna in Birmingham says, it doesn't surprise me that it takes NHS England 8 days to get back to you. That's about as long as you wait to see a doctor, and then it's on Zoom. Not surprising at all, says Donna in Birmingham. I mean, how difficult can it be? How difficult can it be to answer a simple question? How much have you spent since the general election, since Wes Streeting became Health Secretary, on private healthcare? What is that as a proportion of the NHS's budget? Surely that is a very straightforward thing, but apparently it takes 8 days. Anyway, they will get back to me. I will tweet it out. I will let you know. But I've been asking them, quite a high level actually, for a number of days. Department of Health doesn't seem to know the answer. Right then, let's speak to Claire in the Whirl about this story. This is a really, really interesting story about a man who burned the Quran, who originally faced charges for harassing Islam. Claire, what's your thought on this?
Hello, Peter.
Hi there.
Good to talk to you. Hi.
Hi.
Well, I think the Crime Prosecution Service are really pushing this blasphemy law. We already have a backdoor to Islamic law courts in this country. We have a total of 300 Shahira law courts.
And not a single one of those should exist, as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly. Why in this country, in Britain, do we have these Islamic law courts? No. I can't believe it, because in any other country, unless they're an Islamic country, which we're not, although it should be said we do have Jewish religious courts as well. I mean, frankly, I'd ban them all. Yeah, well, I suppose we would. Yeah, I suppose we would have to. I don't really know anything about the Jewish law courts, I'm afraid. I'm not. Haven't really found out about that. So I'm glad you told me, Peter.
Yeah, no, there are a number of different religions that have them, and they shouldn't, because the law of our country has to be supreme. It has to be the way that people deal with the culture of this country. But they've changed it now, and in fairness to the CPS, the Crime Prosecution Service says we charged this person on the basis that his actions caused harassment, alarm, or distress, which is a criminal offence, and that this was motivated by hostility towards a religious or racial group. As part of our continuous review of ongoing cases, we concluded the wording of the charge was incorrectly applied, and we have substituted a new charge to more accurately reflect the alleged offence. I'm terribly sorry we got it wrong there, Claire.
No, and I think they will be kind of pushing it through eventually.
Well, I hope not.
But I think that really they have taken a hold of our establishment in this country. They've taken a hold of our police establishment, our judiciary, our council officials, our prisons. I could go on, really.
Who's they, Claire? Do you just think Muslims in general?
Well, the Islamic establishment, really. I mean, where are the imams and the community leaders? Why aren't they speaking out about these rape gangs?
Yeah, I'd love to hear from more of them on that, Claire.
Of them, they're supposed to have such a hold over this country. But I haven't heard anything about these rape gangs. Anybody being up in arms about any imams?
Yeah.
Has anyone spoken from the Muslim community?
I've had one or two people on, but not nearly enough, and they need to be a lot more vocal. Did you watch the Channel 4 documentary, Claire?
No, I've tried to get onto it. I've got to. I'm having a bit of a problem getting onto the channel.
You've forgotten your PIN, Claire, haven't you? You can't remember what it is.
Well, I've got a brain problem at the moment.
Claire, do you know what, actually? A number of people, and please tell me to take a hike if you don't want me to ask you about this. This is your personal medical information. But a number of people have contacted me and saying, how's Claire? Is it okay to ask, how's Claire?
Well, how's Claire? I don't know at the moment, I'm afraid, Peter, because it's been a long journey, really, and I've waited 10 weeks to actually speak to a neurologist. I mean, they've concentrated on the ophthalmology side of it because it's affected my eye.
Okay.
And I'm trying to sort of get an appointment sorted. But, when you think really 10 weeks for something like this...
far too long.
It's quite a long wait.
Yeah.
I'd just like to have talk to a specialist and get a little bit of an idea about where I'm going, really, besides anything else, because they haven't got into the whole sort of taking a biopsy or whatever.
Right.
So, but thank you. I would like to thank your viewers.
Well, there've been a number of people, Claire, that have maybe texted me or maybe sent me a direct message on Twitter or something like that, just saying, always love to hear your opinions and also how are you getting on. So I hope you don't mind me asking you, Claire, but thank you for letting us know. We wish you well and ring anytime, Claire. You're always welcome on my programmes.
That's kind of you, Peter. Thank you very much, and to all of viewers, thank you for their kind thoughts.
Not at all. Thanks, Claire, as well as Claire in the world there. Nigel is in London and wants to talk about this Quran story. Nigel, you're very welcome to the programme. Tell us your view.
Good afternoon. Well, first of all, can I just send my good wishes to Claire?
Of course you can, yeah.
Other people, and we hope that Claire is well and recovers and is in good health and in good spirits. That's it's very important, I think. So,
very nice of you, Nigel. Very nice of you.
Thank you. Well, I think the Quran story, for me, throws up a number of anomalies. As a news photographer, I've noticed this a lot across London. There is, and I'm sorry to use this phrase, but there is definitely a level of two-tier policing going on in the capital, which is abundantly and evidentially clear when they police different types of groups of people. Now, there are many, for instance, there's now a new protest tonight in Swiss Cottage against the Jewish community.
Another one. For goodness sake.
Yeah. Well, they're coming back now to Swiss Cottage. There's been a number in London of protests, yet the police, when they're faced with people flying flags from prescribed terrorist organisations and shouting out racial slurs, they don't arrest them. Now, I'm sorry, the law either works or it doesn't work. We can't have police officers...
You're absolutely right, Nigel. I agree with you on all of this. And I was talking to a copper recently, just a constable guy I was having a chat with, and he said, do you know what, they do charge some of these people. And I said, well, they look at the footage, they gather all the evidence, and then they do find some of these people and then charge them for racial hatred and hatred offences, incitement charges, supporting Hamas or Hezbollah, for example, which are prescribed organisations. And I said, well, why don't they flipping tell us about it? Because I would love the Metropolitan Police to say, hello, Talk, we would love to come in and do an interview on Monday morning. You see that protest that was happening on Saturday? Yep. That was 48 hours ago. We've looked at all the footage. We think we are about to charge, 100 people or 50 people or however many it is. This is what we're doing. But they never tell you any of that. They never make it clear what work they're actually doing. And then they say, oh, we're treated unfairly. Well, just tell us. Their communication is abysmal.
Well, Peter, look, I can just perhaps answer that question for you. Your co-workers have got my number. I think I may have met you on a few jobs in Downing Street. I can't remember. But I'm on the Met Police email list. Mm-hmm. And the Met Police email do put out emails about, on such a date, we're looking for X, Y, Z.
Yeah, I've seen those.
And they put out... And then they put out footage and they put out pictures and then they say we've arrested X, Y, Z from, I don't know, wherever they're from. But the fundamental point of my call is this, is policing has changed to be a post-policing job as opposed to a proactive job. In other words, years ago at protests and demonstrations, police used to see people committing offences, they would be arrested and removed. Now they rely on CCTV and they have their own CCTV camera crews. Just imagine how much effort goes into looking at videos, trying to identify people weeks and months later, and then the efforts to try and find them, where straight away, without trying to be flippant, you're looking at gift officers because someone's committed an offence right under your nose.
And I totally agree. I totally agree with you on that, Nigel. I did actually make that almost exact point to the copper I was chatting to, and he said, well, that might make more people at risk, that might start a riot, or that might cause a riot against the police. And he said the thing as a policeman, he was saying anyway, that you realise very quickly is how completely outnumbered you are in a lot of these situations.
Well, Peter, I've got to say one thing about the police. They need to remember how to police, because clearly they've forgotten how to police. They aren't doing a very good job. They're letting the country down. They're letting the people down. And now these huge cuts coming to the Met are astonishing, where they're taking away so many different facets across London. It's astonishing. And I just don't understand how London has become. It's a very dangerous, difficult city to live in, and I'm not trying to emphasise it strongly enough, but it really is.
Sure.
It really is.
Nigel, if you ever see me out and about in Downing Street or anything like that, please do say hello. I'd love to.
Sure, I will do.
Love to properly. We've probably chatted briefly, but I haven't sort of connected the dots on that one. So it'd be lovely to have a chat with you, Nigel. Thanks very much. Appreciate that. That's Nigel, who is a press photographer. 0344 499 1000 is the number he has rung, and also you can send voice notes on that number as well. Let's hear one from Stephen on disciplining your children.
When you're talking about parents being their kids' best friends, not only do they grow up where they cannot discipline them, but them same kids grow up without a work ethic because they can't be told anything. Those are the ones that end up sitting in the house. And then when they get asked to go to work, when they feel like they have to, they get all anxious and they will not leave the house. Pathetic parents, spare the rod, ruin the child.
Stephen, thanks for that. Peter has been in touch on the tariffs question.
I don't understand what's going on about the tariffs. If, as appears to be the case, blast furnaces are being shut down and the steel making is being converted into making by electricity, then what benefit, what are we going to have to export?
It's a very, very good point, Peter. And actually, the arch system, the non-blast furnace bit, only doesn't create virgin steel. It doesn't create the original stuff. It can melt down old steel and make it into recycled steel, but that's not the quality that many require. So certainly there are big questions about that. And there are also, I think, the fundamental question actually about the blast furnace and about Scunthorpe. Well, there's two really. One is about Aberdeen, and that was brought up by Stephen Flynn this week, the leader of the SNP at Prime Minister's Questions, that 250 jobs have gone in Aberdeen in basically the same area of manufacturing, and Keir Starmer doesn't seem to care about that. Similarly, what the Labour government has shown with the Scunthorpe issue is that things can happen really quickly. If they have the political will, things can happen within a day. Why can't they sort out other issues in our country? Why can't they enforce legislation? Why can't they sort out grooming gangs in a day, for example? Let me know what you think about all those questions. 0344 499 1000. We'll take more calls, of course, between now and 7. There's loads more to discuss, including the sport, which is coming up next.
don't know whether Downing Street feel that they've got away with it because after a while, the story dies down and people discuss other stories. But I don't think it will be forgiven or forgotten. I think it's a disgraceful response, and I think that the anger will continue until those responsible for turning a blind eye are held to account and removed from positions in authority. I mean, this could still be going on.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, now it is time for the
Sport Summary on Talk.
With us this evening is Ian Danter, who is a Talk Sport commentator. Ian, you're very welcome to the programme. How are you doing?
Good, thanks, Peter. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And good news for Manchester United and Spurs fans. Last night they progressed through to the Europa League final. Who are the favourites to win, do you think?
Ooh, blimey. There'll be some of both sets of supporters think that they'll both lose because they've had such wretched seasons in the league, and this offers one little olive branch of comfort to both Ruben Amorim and Ange Postecoglou. I know it's really hard to pick a winner out of those two because they're consistent in their inconsistency. There is this narrative that's run throughout the season where Ange Postecoglou said he always wins a trophy in his second season as a manager, and that has kind of haunted him right the way throughout the season. But he's got a chance to prove that he's absolutely correct in that assumption. But it's a flip of a coin. Sorry to be so.
That's okay.
It really is.
No, I totally understand that. That'll be on the 21st of May, so it's not long to go now. Further good news for Chelsea. Tell us about the European final they've made it to.
Yeah, they beat Djurgården of Sweden quite comfortably over 2 legs, and they've now got Real Betis, who needed extra time to get past Fiorentina last night. And Betis are managed by Manuel Pellegrini, who Enzo Maresca, the Chelsea manager, sees as kind of a father figure who helped him develop in his early days in coaching and then into management. So that's a nice little story to come for that Conference League final. But again, Chelsea have not had a stellar season. They've spent so much money on players and investing in the squad, and it's not led to anything in terms of really strong league position. But again, a chance to win a European trophy shouldn't be sniffed at.
Tell us about the battle to get to the Premier League. It's the turn of Coventry and Sunderland. Tell us your thoughts on them and who the most informed side is on the playoffs tonight, of course.
Well, I was at Bristol City last night when Sheffield United won 3-0 in their first leg of the playoffs. So the winners of that will face the winners of Coventry and Sunderland at Wembley at the end of May. And Coventry, who was 17th in November when Frank Lampard took over at the club, they got themselves into the playoffs. Their home form is terrific. Sunderland have known that they were in the playoffs for some weeks now, and their form has really tailed off. They've lost their last 5 games of the season and only scored 1 goal in those 5 games. And you can't just turn it off and on like a tap in terms of your desire to win football matches. So Coventry being at home tonight, live on talkSPORT, should, I think, be able to take an advantage back up to the Stadium of Light for the second leg.
In other big football news, the former Liverpool and Real Madrid defender has announced he is leaving Bayer Leverkusen. He has successfully won the title last season. Could a big European club be calling on his services?
Oh, Real Madrid. It's an open secret. I think Carlo Ancelotti's time at Real Madrid is done, and Xabi Alonso in his short spell has essentially given Bayer Leverkusen the greatest period in their history. Winning them the Bundesliga title against the might of Bayern Munich is no mean feat in the modern era. and he did it without any huge superstars in part of his squad. But now he's going to be inheriting a whole bucket load of superstars as Real Madrid's surely their next incoming manager. So he'll have Mbappe and Bellingham and others to have at his disposal. Every manager wants to manage Real Madrid. I think it's always in everybody's back of everybody's minds that it's kind of the ultimate club to manage. Let's see how he does.
Thanks very much for that update. That's Ian Danter there, TalkSport commentator. Appreciate you joining us on the programme this evening. Thank you to Smudge in Swindon, who says, Cardi P, I was brought up in a council house in a Staffordshire village. I was lucky enough to be allowed to join the Air Training Corps from the age of 13 years old. I joined the RAF at almost 16 as an aircraft engineering apprentice. My ATC, Air Training Corps, experience stood me in good stead throughout my 30-year career in the RAF. Both the ATC and the RAF gave me an interesting life. I'm an old bloke now, but I would recommend such a course through life to modern day youngsters, says Smudge. Well, listen, that is a really good testament to the life that you've had, and thank you for serving our country, and I wish you all the best, Smudge, especially with the magic roundabout in Swindon, which is very strange. Mike in Lincoln says, when I went to school in the 1970s, most of the male teachers were of an age that meant that they had served in World War II, and believe me, they broke no nonsense, and we fully respected them for it. They also taught us things like map reading, chess, British military history, and a whole host of other things too. It put me on the path to serving 12 years in the army myself, says Mike. Well, thank you for that, Mike. Bev in Hampshire says, on school discipline, in my opinion, teachers have lost control of the classroom. Not because of a lack of discipline. The teachers have lost control because they're not trained as teachers anymore, but do a meaningless degree. And then when they realise they can't do anything with their degree, they do a postgraduate certificate in education for a few months and teach a subject they know little about and are clueless about teaching. A granddaughter in Year 8 had to correct the maths teacher on a number of occasions with his maths. I think rather than pushing children to do advanced education, which is not for everyone, an option should be a year in a type of military service, says Bev in Hampshire. I think that is a really interesting thought there, and I don't disagree with it at all. I remember we had a substitute teacher in my school and we had to correct his maths. He was the maths teacher. It wasn't great. We had a very, very good maths teacher who then went off on maternity leave. But that's all decades ago, and I'm not bitter and twisted about getting the B rather than the A I should have got in GCSE maths. Lots of kids doing exams at the moment, young people I should say, whether they're doing GCSEs or A levels. If you're their grandparent, their parent, or them themselves, all I would say is the best advice that was given to me is quite simple. They're worth the effort, they are not worth the stress. In the next hour, we're going to talk more about the US-UK trade deal. We're going to talk about the church must reach areas lacking faith. That's what Pope Leo says in his first mass. And Specsavers boss expensed unicorn cupcakes for her child's birthday. Yes, really. Let me know what you think about all of that.
How much?
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this evening. I'm here between now and 7 and then back tomorrow on Sunday from 10 a.m. There's lots to discuss, including the US-UK trade deal. It's a huge relief, according to a minister. Businesses are calling for more clarity. What is that clarity? What have we actually got here? What does it really mean? We'll talk to John Cooper, who's a Conservative MP, in just a second. Also, the church must reach areas lacking faith, says Pope Leo. He's told his first Mass, the new American Pope. And Nicole Whittaker will be with us a little bit later on about the Specsavers boss expensing unicorn cupcakes for her child's birthday. What you can get away with on expenses is not the same as it used to be. Certainly, unicorn cupcakes should not be expensed, it must be said. Lots to discuss. I want your views too. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk. And of course, getting in touch is dead easy. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about John Cooper in just a second, but I just want to share my opinion on something, and I'm not sure if it's a popular opinion or not. I'd love you to tell me whether I'm right or not, because I'm kind of not sure. Right, you know this Sycamore Gap tree, this tree that these horrible people cut down. They shouldn't have cut it down. It was absolutely beautiful tree. It's in an area, you know, UNESCO World Heritage Site in a lovely, lovely area in the north of England. It was a beautiful tree. They cut it down. They shouldn't have done so. They've been criminally charged with that. They've been found guilty, and you know the sycamore tree is down and the trial has happened. They've been found guilty and they're going to be sentenced. I don't really know why the national media is going crazy on this story. It's the top story on Sky and BBC all day. The BBC 1 o'clock news, which I watched, did 6 minutes on it at the start of the news. I just wonder, is it that big a deal? I mean, it's not a nice thing. I don't think people should go out and cut down trees. I don't think people should be cut down the Sycamore Gap tree, for example. There are reasons to cut down trees, of course, if it's dead or whatever. This is a particularly beautiful and important tree. Lots of people scattered ashes there. I understand, people propose there, things like that. I get it. I understand that. I can see why some people thought it was a very, very important tree. But at the end of the day, it's a tree. There are so many other very, very important issues in the world today, and specifically in our country this very day. And I can see on the screens in front of me that the BBC and Sky are still talking about this. We decided today not to really talk about it, but I just decided maybe to give you my opinion on it. Am I right? Wrong? What do you think? Do you care? It shouldn't have happened. It should, as I say, I'm not advocating, I'm not saying it's a good thing at all. I'm just wondering why people are so annoyed about it. Am I missing something here? Is it that big a news story? 0344 499 1000. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. I'd be very interested in your opinion. I don't really know, but my instinct is there are more important things to talk about, including the UK-US trade deal, which a minister says is a huge relief. But Rachel Reeves' deputy, a man called Darren Jones, who's the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, he says that he doesn't actually know when it's going to be implemented. Well, John Cooper is a Conservative MP for Dumfries and Galloway. He's also a member of the Business and Trade Select Committee. John, thank you for joining me this evening. How big a deal is this trade deal, and are you having a sigh of relief that it's happening? Are you surprised that it's happened? And do you think it's going to make a real difference to people here in this country?
Will make a difference for some people, certainly. And I think short term, the real people who are gaining here are people who are in the automotive industry. They were really concerned about these big, big tariffs that were going to hit companies like Jaguar Land Rover, McLaren, Bentley. They were looking at potentially job losses as soon as next week. So I think there is some relief for them. I think beyond that, it's not such a big deal. And there are going to be losers as well. And one of the losers, I fear, again, will be farmers, because the changes to beef arrangements are probably going to hit us harder than it's going to affect the Americans.
Yeah, and certainly from that perspective, farmers just haven't been treated well by this government. There are a lot of people who either are farmers or in the farming community, or people who know farmers, who really are not happy with a lot of that. That is something that clearly is a major part of this trade deal. What do you think is good about it?
So I think what's good about it, as I say, is the automotive industry and that enormous supply chain there as well. So as well as these big companies like Jaguar Land Rover, you've lots of little companies who supply really important small parts to the industry, and there's hundreds of jobs there, and they really were at direct risk. So short term, there's a bit of relief there. There is this cap on it's only the first 100,000 vehicles that will go to America. So there are questions there about further down the line capacity and things like that.
Yeah, and I wonder as well from Donald Trump's perspective, I mean, how confident are you that what is agreed will actually be implemented? Because we have the Chief Secretary of the Treasury saying he doesn't really know the timescale on this. Also, are you, as not just an MP, but a very informed one, as being on the Business and Trade Select Committee, are you confident you're going to have some say in all of this?
So Parliament will have scrutiny of these deals, as they always will, and certain people are calling for Parliament to have a vote on this. But again, they're the kind of people who were calling for reciprocal tariffs on the Americans, to hit back at the Americans, and that was nonsense. I mean, I think one thing that Labour has got right in this case is they've been cool, they've been calm, they've been collected, and they've managed to put together a deal. Will the Americans stand over the deal? Yes, I think that they will. Implementation timescales, I've no clue on that. You need to ask Darren Jones about that himself.
He doesn't even know.
One of the things I thought was interesting as well was that Darren couldn't bring himself to say that this deal is only possible because of Brexit. Brexit has given Britain the flexibility that it needs to do.
I mean, that is factually true, isn't it, John? I mean, it is a factual point that we could not have done a trade deal if we were in the EU. I mean, I've known that since 2016. We've been told about that. We've been told, I mean, I voted Remain, but that doesn't matter. My side lost. I got over it and said, right, let's get on with Brexit. And we got into a situation where it was so clear for such a long time that freedom and that trade freedom is something that we've been able to do. I wonder why he can't just say, well, yeah, actually, as Donald Trump says, and as is factually the case, Brexit has meant that we will have probably a better deal than other EU countries when it comes to America.
Yes, completely. I mean, that's the only reason that we're able to do this deal and other deals around the world. So there's a new deal with India. We're in a thing called the CPTPP, which is a terrible name, but it's a big deal.
Try saying that after a few Islay malts, John.
Yes, exactly that, and certainly not with these teeth in as well. But I mean, this is giving us a latitude, a freedom of movement, a freedom of decision that we would never have had before. We would have had to throw our lot in with the EU and all the difficulties of getting everyone in the EU to sign up to these things. So we're light on our feet, we're agile now thanks to Brexit. And as I say, I don't know why Labour can't bring themselves to admit that.
What do you think of what Andrew Bailey has said? He is the Governor of the Bank of England. He said the UK now needs to rebuild its trade relationship with the European Union and do, as he put it, everything we can to improve long-term trade after the US deal.
Yeah, well, he's not wrong in that of course we should try and do deals with whoever we can do deals with, and we never fell out with Europe. I mean, Brexit was not the severing of the ways and the parting of the ways. We continued to trade with Europe, and of course we should always look for ways to reduce the friction in trade and try and make things make things simpler. We were the Business and Trade Committee was in Belfast earlier this week, and we saw there some of the difficulties with that border with the EU there. But businesses in Northern Ireland do a tremendous job of working around that, and we should seek ways all the time to try and make these things simpler.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting point. I wonder if I can ask you about this story as well in regard to pupils given military training to instill discipline. This is a survey, a voluntary MOD scheme involving pupils being put through armed forces style exercises, drills and trips. It's 268 state schools and 221 private schools. Do you think it's a good thing, John, bad thing? What are your thoughts?
I think it's absolutely a fantastic idea. So I was in the Boys Brigade when I was younger, and it was sort of military style.
Yeah, I was in the Boys Brigade too. Not the same one.
It was not the same one. No, I was in First Stranraer, I think, and possibly not the one you were in.
I was in second Rich Hill. We always had quite a healthy rivalry with First Rich Hill, must be said.
And I thoroughly enjoyed that, and it was tremendous. And it gave you skills. It gave me things like first aid skills and things like that. But it was just generally great fun, and I think it taught you a bit of respect as well. No bad thing at all.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting point. We are also talking this afternoon about the man who burned the Quran, facing charges. He doesn't anymore, but he was originally facing charges for harassing Islam. This is something your party colleague Robert Jenrick has talked about in some detail. What do you make of this controversy, John?
So I think Rob's done some tremendous work on this, and I've raised in Parliament as well the question of blasphemy laws, and I was told there would be no blasphemy laws. Well, this looked awfully like blasphemy laws coming in by the back door, and I said in Parliament that this is the land of Monty Python and the Life of Brian. We do not protect religions in this way. We've got to be free to say whatever we like about religions. Bad behaviour, of course, should be punished. There's no doubt about that. And the laws, I think, cover things like burning books. If that's is causing upset, then there may be charges that can be brought, but it absolutely cannot be blasphemy laws by the back door.
Always looking on the bright side of life there, John. Appreciate that. That's John Cooper there, who is the MP for Dumfries and Galloway for the Conservatives. He's also a member of the Business and Trade Select Committee. Thank you to him. Quite a few people getting in touch about the sycamore tree. Thank you to Jane, who says perhaps they're talking about the tree because they don't want to talk about the failing government, grooming gangs, how the public are neglected and treated like second-class citizens. They were cheerleaders for wanting this Labour government and cannot admit how bad things are outside their bubbles. Although I'm accused of being in a bubble by Stephen in Lincolnshire. He says, regarding the sycamore, normally you're in touch with the UK psyche, Peter. If you don't understand the fury about this, then you're out of touch. Too much time in that London, methinks, says Stephen. Stephen, I think I do understand why people are annoyed. I don't really understand why they're so annoyed, and I don't understand why it's such big news, and I don't understand why it's the lead item on both Sky and the BBC for a number of minutes. And I mean, there was someone was contacting me earlier on saying a reporter on BBC 5 Live said one of the accused had remarked in court that the incident was being treated like a murder. The reporter added, however, that's how many people see it. I mean, it's not a murder. It's cutting down a tree. I don't want it to happen. I don't think it was a nice thing. I wouldn't advocate it. It was a beautiful tree. I wish it hadn't been cut down. I just don't know why so many people are getting really, 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 really angry about it and why it's the lead story on two of our national news outlets. Anyway, JB in Aberdeenshire says the sycamore tree felling is a big deal because it is about behavioural traits in society, not specifically the tree itself, although people have to understand the time scales regarding tree growth. It will be a generation before this tree grows to its previous position. Even though sycamore trees are almost the weed of the tree family, it should have been respected. Now, having said that, what you should be talking about is the thousands of trees desecrated and felled to satisfy the junk science of net zero and the manic ideology of Ed Miliband and his political cohorts of that and that of the uncaring corporate entities who put profit before all else. That's the real story. JB, surely we're planting a load more trees. Surely that's part of net zero. We want that to happen. Yes, Nigel says the sycamore tree is not as big a thing as the main issues talk usually talks about. The only thing worth talking about regarding it is why the national media have decided to make it a story rather than manifesto lies, child rape and making British nationals second-class citizens to legal and illegal migrants. Penny says it was a beautiful tree and this was mindless vandalism. Yes, it should be talked about, says Penny in Essex. Well, thank you for that very much indeed. Right, let's take a call from Paul in Norwich, who wants to talk about free speech and Starmer's video call with Trump as well. Paul, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, good evening. I wanted to say, I wonder how many people, how many millions perhaps, noticed that when Starmer was doing a video call with President Trump yesterday, apart from his performance being abysmal, how many people noticed the last question from the last journalist asking about free speech? From what I understand, President Trump was saying no deal with the UK for free trade if he doesn't reinstate free speech. And it was yesterday reiterated by a journalist, and yesterday Starmer had the audacity to repeat what he'd said in the White House, which is we've had free speech for a long, long, long time, and we intend to keep it for a long, long, long time.
Yeah.
And yet we've got people like Lucy Connolly in prison for 3 years for a tweet, amongst numerous other people who are also in prison and going through the process of the courts. So I'm wondering why or how is it that Starmer's got the audacity to say it twice on live television in front of...
Well, he clearly believes there is free speech in this country. Lucy Connolly and many people who support her, like you, Paul, clearly believe it isn't the case. And I would argue that someone who sent that, I think it was a Facebook message, should not be sentenced to prison for 2.5 years. I think that is very, very excessive.
Excessive.
Yeah.
It could have been a slap on the wrist. It could have been...
I'd have probably given her a caution.
Yeah, it could have been... I mean, they could have said, yes, that's hate speech, but we don't deem it...
It was more about... I think it was more about incitement and inciting a violent act. I don't think she should have sent it. I don't think there are too many people, and I'm sure you haven't... Nobody's saying it was a good thing that she did it, but 2.5 years in prison seems ridiculous.
It was far too excessive. But the main thing that I really wanted to, and I just wish the mainstream media would do like Talk TV do and Talk Radio do, which they bring up the topics that the people want to talk about. And this is why so many millions of people now are watching Talk TV on their laptops or on their televisions and on their radios, because they don't want to listen to any other news. BBC is absolutely useless.
Well, it's really interesting you mention that, Paul, because we do think about that. And I mean, last Sunday, for example, I had the health secretary on, and what happened was a really, really good thing, which was people sent me messages on their phones, and anybody can do this with WhatsApp, for example, on 0344 499 1000, sent me messages to ask the health secretary. I then asked the health secretary, not every question, I had my own questions as well, but I asked at least 3 or 4 that had been sent in, and nobody else does that. No other station does that. I've got the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, on Sunday, for example, my show on Sunday. You know, what people want to ask him, for example, they can just send me the questions we ask them, and we hear from people like you, Paul. And I think there's so many people who are neglected in this country. There's a silent majority of people who have opinions that just aren't being represented, and we're representing them, and that's one of the many things that makes me proud to work for this station.
Absolutely. I watch GB News and I watch Talk TV. And I'll watch whichever's got the better topic, to be honest.
All right, well, I would encourage you to watch the latter, but Paul, thank you so much. I really appreciate your thoughts on that. There's some breaking news now here on Talk, and that's that a 31-year-old Iranian man has been arrested in northwest London under the National Security Act 2023. This is as part of a counter-terrorism policing investigation in which another 3 Iranian men were detained. That's according to the Metropolitan Police. We'll bring you any more detail on that if we get it before 7 o'clock. Let me just reiterate that. That's a 31-year-old Iranian man has been arrested in northwest London under the National Security Act 2023. This is as part of a counter-terrorism policing investigation. We know that 3 other Iranian men were detained, the Metropolitan Police said, and certainly I don't want to get into any speculation around that, but it's clear that the earlier investigation of the 3 other men related to a potential attack on the Israeli embassy in London, which is in West London in Kensington. Right then, I want to talk to Molly, who has given me a ring from Derbyshire, one of the most beautiful parts of the world. You've got some beautiful trees up there in Derbyshire, Molly. I lived in Derby for a few months, and the Shire is just gorgeous, isn't it?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's lovely to hear that.
Whereabouts do you live, Molly? Because I got I worked for BBC Radio Derby back in the day, and I was in the radio car, and I would drive around the Shire, so I know it relatively well. Whereabouts are you?
I do actually live in Derby.
Oh, you live in the city of Derby itself. Ah, very good. I've been known to do the pub quiz at the 7 Stars when I was there.
Oh well, I've only been there a year or so. I moved from Huddersfield.
Go to the 7 Stars. It's lovely. It's a great pub.
Oh, I should, shouldn't I?
You should. Well, Molly, your thoughts on the sycamore tree? Am I right? Am I wrong? What do you think?
Well, you said we've got some beautiful trees there, but what you said earlier, Peter, really, I was quite disappointed in you, because I thought, the thing is, yeah, it's just a tree, but it's the significance of that tree and what it meant to people. And also, it's the mindlessness of what these 2 idiots did.
Oh, I agree with all of that, Molly. I agree with everything you say. Why does it mean so much to people, do you think?
Well, imagine if you had a loved one that passed and you made a memorial garden, and then someone just came along and just vandalised it. It's that. It's this lack of... just a lack of, I don't know, a care. Just how 2 idiots. I don't know. I just think it says a lot about society.
I agree with everything you've said, Molly. I just don't know whether it should be a big story. Can I just read you a message from one of our viewers and listeners and then get your reaction to it, Molly? So this is from Mary in County Down in Northern Ireland, who says, idiots, vandals and thugs have always existed, wreaking mindless destruction on nature and our towns. The cutting down of the tree represents nothing more than this. It's not an attack on society, nor does it suggest that society doesn't value nature. People, particularly the BBC, Sky and other media, need to calm down, stop peddling this as a major story, and get back to covering the real issues threatening and damaging our society, not least inequality, poverty, terrorism, uncontrolled immigration and anti-Semitism. That's a selection of our real problems, says Mary. What would you say to Mary, Molly?
Okay, so I think we go back to this broken window syndrome, isn't it? This, phenomenon. If you just let that slide, and you say, oh yeah, they've just felled a tree, fine, we'll look at it, it's not
We're not saying let it slide. I'm not saying don't prosecute the people. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just wondering why it's such a big deal.
I don't know, and do you know, I don't know. To be fair, I've never been to it, I've never seen it, But I don't know, it really hit me hard.
Okay.
I did. I was affected by this story, and it really upset me, especially these two idiots.
Yeah, well,
they?
they'll get the book thrown at them. It'll be very interesting to see what their sentence is as well. Molly, thank you very much indeed. Do have a pint in the Seven Stars or a nice glass of wine. It's a lovely pub there in Derby. Thank you for your call from Molly. Donna in Birmingham says the sycamore tree is a symbol of our society. It's there, a thing of glorious beauty, some good for nothing. Rogues cut it down in 30 minutes. It was actually less than that. It was about 3 minutes. It took hundreds of years to grow, and that's it, gone like our society. It's thrown away, says Donna. And just one more before the break. Maggie in West Yorkshire says there are millions of trees, but the sycamore was a one-off. It was unique, says Maggie. Lots to think about there. Let me know your thoughts as well. 0344 499 1000. We're going to be talking about the Catholic Church next. The Church must reach areas lacking faith, says Pope Leo. I mean, if he's not doing that, he's not really doing his job anyway, is he? Stay with us here on Talk.
There's now a caucus of what's called Blue Labour MPs. Blue Labour is a tendency within the Labour Party that's been around for about 15 years, which actually predicted the rupture between the Labour Party and the working class because of the party's position on things like globalisation and mass immigration. And understands that actually there is very much a small c conservative thread that runs through many working class communities. You can be Labour, you can be proud Labour, but still be a small c conservative. You know, the post-industrial Britain is full of voters like that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you everyone who's been in touch on the tree and also on boot camps. Laura says, regarding boot camps, back in the 1950s, my two brothers were naughty, not evil, but naughty. My mum was trying to bring up 5 kids on her own. She was advised to place my brothers into Borstal. It was the making of my brothers, who went on to become very successful military careers. Secondly, why are our Jewish communities being treated badly? I never hear of them doing terrible things. That's a very good point, Laura, which I've been asking for quite a while. Betty says, and thank you for your thoughts on that. Betty says, hi Peter, the USA uses different design codes and steel sections and yields. The UK does not export steel to the US unless a special order. There are no aluminium plants in the UK. Good for defence, but still worse than last month. That's why stock market has crashed again. It's all nonsense, says Betty. Chelsea said nonsense. She said another word that I'm not going to read at 26 minutes past 6 in the evening, or indeed at any time on the radio, because I'll be wrapped over the knuckles by Compliance Claire. Penny in Essex says, hi Peter, a teacher took a child to the headmaster. The headmaster asked the teacher what she had done to make the child misbehave. It is unbelievable, says Penny. And someone else who will be concentrating on misbehaviour is no doubt the Pope. Pope Leo XIV, he is the new Pope, he's an American, and he has said that the Church must reach areas lacking faith. I would expect he would say that. He has held his first Mass. He says he hopes to help the Church be a beacon of light. This is Robert Prevost, who is 69 and from Chicago, who's elected during the second day of a conclave aimed at electing a successor to the late Pope Francis. He died in April, aged 88. We've got a much younger Pope now, just 69 years old. He will be around for quite a while. And Melanie McDonough is a Catholic journalist. She writes for all sorts of different outlets, including The Standard and The Spectator. Melanie, thank you for joining us this evening. What do you make of the new Pope and what the start that he has had?
Well, he's been an attractive presence, I think. He's been quite quietly spoken. He hasn't been kind of bombastic, if anything, a little bit reserved. It was interesting when he appeared on the balcony last night. There wasn't a word out of him in English. He addressed the Peruvians in the crowd rather than the Americans. And he seemed to be identifying as Peruvian rather than American.
He is a naturalised Peruvian citizen, isn't he?
Well, he had to be because he became a bishop in Peru, and the state requires you, I think, in that case, to become a naturalised citizen. So it wasn't that he was rejecting his own background, but just a requirement of the job.
How political do you think he will be? I'm a political specialist and I'm interested in some of his tweets. I'm interested in some of the things that he has said that appear to be in opposition to various people, including J.D. Vance and Donald Trump.
Well, I think you can say one thing when you're a bishop, another thing when you're an archbishop and a cardinal, and then very different again when you're a pope. So he may have to hold himself in his present position or speak more guardedly. But when he was an archbishop in Peru, he was quite outspoken on the politics of the region and very outspoken about the Shining Path terrorist groups. So he does have it in him to take a strong stance on issues. It's just a question of whether he deploys that more judiciously as Pope, because you have to mind what you say, as Pope Francis found to his cost.
There's some alleging that he looked the other way in regard to things like paedophile scandals. How much truth is there in that, and how do you think he'll deal with that issue?
I think he'll deal with it well. I mean, there was a case where he was said not to have taken proper penal measures against two priest offenders, but he did meet the victims and he did encourage people quite publicly and repeatedly to report cases of clerical abuse. So he's been very much sort of pro-victim and very much transparency. There have been other cases where he's kind of been at further remove from the offenders, that is to say, as head of the Augustinian order. There was a case where an Augustinian schoolmaster, for instance, is alleged to have committed abuse, and he didn't perhaps take responsibility for that, but that's not immediately under his jurisdiction. It was more, it was at a further distance. So I think in terms of his approach to these things, he does say all the right things and do the right things, but obviously he may have been less rigorous than he should have been in that particular instance. One element I think is quite interesting, and that is his background. His mother is from mixed heritage, that is to say, her father was Haitian and partly black, I gather, and her mother was Creole, that is to say, of African American heritage, from New Orleans. And so it seems to me that the Pope is at least 1/8 or a quarter African American, so that could give him a slightly different perspective on things, though it's not immediately apparent, obviously.
I wonder if you think that, as well as obviously the paedophile scandal, what do you think are the main issues that he will have to deal with as Pope? Because you're leading a religion, of course, but it is a sort of small p political role, and you have so much influence on so many people.
You do. I think he gave us an indication of the direction of travel when he said what you quoted at the outset, that it was for him to be a beacon of light, for the Church to be a beacon of light to those areas that have turned away from God. And I think he may be saying there that he'll be taking the fight, that is to say, the spiritual struggle, into those parts of Europe and the Americas where there's been a falling away from the practice of Christianity. For instance, in Germany, 250,000 people left the church last year, and that extent of that loss is simply unsustainable over time.
Why do so many people leave the Catholic Church in Germany?
Well, there is a financial incentive there because if you belong to the church, if you're affiliated to the church, then the part of your tax goes towards the church. So I can see that there's a kind of problematic aspect to that.
So you don't have tax taken off you to go to any religious institution if you are not a member of it in Germany, is that correct?
Yes, it's the case with the Lutheran Protestant Church as well.
Okay.
So Pope Benedict thought that was corrupting, and it may be that this Pope will take the same approach. But throughout Western Europe, we have a similar phenomenon, in France also. But you've got the very strange phenomenon in
not the first time paying money to the church has proved controversial to Lutherans, one might argue, Melanie.
Well, exactly so. But that's another thing he's got on his agenda, which won't be apparent to most of us. That's to say, trying to sort out Vatican finances. And he's a mathematician by university training, so please God, he'll actually have a handle on the figures here, and he can read a balance sheet, because the Vatican finances are in a very poor state. It's a church that looks terrifically rich from the outside, but actually is in a really bad condition when it comes to the internal finances.
Melanie, thank you very much indeed. That's Melanie McDonough there, who took my joke about the Reformation in good heart there, studied at A level. She is a Catholic journalist. She writes for The Standard and Spectator and other outlets as well. Lots of people getting in touch about the tree, including Guy, who says, enjoying the show this evening. Regarding the sycamore, maybe people see it as a symbol of our country, something majestic which took hundreds of years to grow, wantonly destroyed in moments. It can't be restored quickly, but throwing those in jail to rot might make us feel a bit better about it in the meantime. Fair points, Guy. Emily in Wiltshire says, I hike for miles in forests to be around trees, but there are more important stories. When you think about it logically, I think we have a love for nature because it never purposefully hurts us, unlike humans. Nick in Oxford says, I would be interested to see if the people who chop down the tree will get more of a sentence than if they had tweeted about chopping down a tree. Good show. Says Nick. Thank you, Nick. That is a very, very good point. Josh said, imagine being affected by a tree you've never seen before. I'm affected by the bills each month, and that should be spoken louder about. Cheers. Love your show. Thanks, Josh. Look, I understand. I mean, I'm affected by things that I've never experienced. You see things on TV. There are people who cry when they see what's happening in the Middle East, for example. I've never been to Afghanistan, but I have an opinion about it, and actually we're going to be talking about that tomorrow in immigration to Afghanistan, my show between 10 and 1 on Talk tomorrow morning, starting at 10 o'clock. But Josh, it's a fair point, and I think there are bigger issues, but nonetheless, that's what people want to talk about today. In different media anyway. And Dave in Kent says the sycamore tree is estimated to be 200 years old. Absolute morons for cutting it down. Dave, on that I do not in any way disagree with you. Now then, Specsavers have a boss there has expensed unicorn cupcakes for her child's birthday. Yes, really. We're going to talk about that in a second. I'll take more of your calls between now and 7. Kevin O'Sullivan, of course, will be here between 7 and 9 in this studio, and then it'll be what just happened with Kevin between 9 and 10. I'll be back, as I say, tomorrow between 10 and 1, and indeed on Sunday from 10 o'clock when I'll be speaking to the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp. Loads to discuss with him, of course, and with you, hopefully, between now and 7, 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you, everybody who has been in touch. Lots more calls coming your way between now and 7. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. I want to talk a bit more about the head of the Royal Navy, who has been suspended over what is alleged to be a secret affair with a subordinate, as a married dad of 3. Also about Specsavers, a boss there has expensed unicorn cupcakes for her child's birthday. I once expensed cigarettes, which is quite nice because I'm not actually a smoker, but I was doing a story for a newspaper about a particular brand of cigarettes, and we needed a photograph of it, and I said to my editor, I said, can I expense these cigarettes, and however much they were at that stage. I mean, this was a number of years ago, probably 12 or 13 pounds. Now a box of cigarettes like about 20 quid. Anyway, got those in expenses. I wonder what you've put or attempted to put on expenses. Certainly not unicorn cupcakes. I speak to Nicole Whitaker. She's an Associate Director of HR Consulting at Peninsula. Thank you, Nicole, for joining me today. Let's start with the cupcakes. What would you say to someone who rang you up and said, actually, hold on a second here, the General Optical Council Tribunal saying these arguments lacking plausibility, you should not in any way be expensing cupcakes?
Well, I think it's quite an interesting story for a Friday, but it certainly does bring into, I suppose, an issue that a lot of businesses will face in terms of expenses, because you're right, what is the expense for? Maybe they were doing a unicorn incentive in the workplace, maybe it was a cake for a member of staff, but I think with this particular case, it was 46 expenses. I think there was a number of others in addition to the unicorn cupcake, and it was found that they were personal expenses following investigation. But
I do love it when she says she claimed the expenses were submitted by mistake or because she did not know what she was allowed to claim for. Well, I mean, if you don't know if you're allowed to claim for something, perhaps you should just check.
I think for that case as well, she was a director, so it was certainly found that it was part of her position to know that policy. But a lot of people might not have it written down. I think that's what's really important as well, to make it really clear for people what they can and can't expense for, and also amounts. I always kind of use the example of a lot of people might take people out for meals, for drinks. What was that for? What's the limit to it? Can you get champagne? Can you get lobster? I do think it needs to be really clear for a lot of businesses about expenses, what the policy is, what they can and can't claim for. And I think with this, because it went on for quite a number of years as well, it doesn't seem that there was a process in place to check those expenses as and when they were submitted, which I think may have prevented it happening.
Auditors found 6 claims were submitted close to the birthdays of her relatives. She also claimed for balloons and a £68.48 Domino's pizza order. I mean, that's quite a lot of pizza.
It's clearly not sure what she was quite celebrating there. So I think with that one, but again, people might expense, like you said yourself, cigarettes. You'd probably think that was a personal expense, but actually it was relevant to your role at the time. And maybe pizza for some people might have been an expense for the team, but I think there was evidence that it wasn't. It was a personal expense. So I think having those checks in place is important as and when they come through.
As journalists, I mean, I was out for a drink with a member of the Westminster lobby. I'm a member of the Westminster lobby as well, the political journalists, and I mean, he was out with politicians and stuff, and buying drinks for them is part of his job because he needs to get stories and so on. But I'm just not sure these unicorn cupcakes were necessarily part of it. Also, Domino's, I mean, come on, Pizza Express every time. Nicole, I want to ask you about the head of the Royal Navy being suspended over a secret affair with a subordinate. That is the allegation. Anyway, he's a married dad of 3. He has previously said, this is Admiral Sir Ben Key. He has previously said he vowed to root out unacceptable sexual behaviour. Those who do not wish to serve in accordance with the values and standards of life in the United Kingdom's armed forces will be removed. There's no place for you. There's no allegation and no suggestion, of course, that he's done anything in terms of abuse of his position. But certainly, workplace relationships can be pretty tricky, Nicole.
Absolutely. I think stories like this are not uncommon, and I think people are always very surprised that businesses, or here in terms of the Royal Navy, that they can put policies and rules in place that prevent relationships. You know, they absolutely can, and I think especially here in terms of the head of the Royal Navy, there was a rule there in terms of relationships between commanders and subordinates, and if he is in breach of that policy, and we don't know yet if he is, but certainly his own words might come back to bite him, but that absolutely can be subject to disciplinary action. It can be subject to dismissal as well. You know, there can be a conflict of interest. There could be, you know, especially for businesses, you know, maybe an abuse of power in this case.
What should you do if you're in, you know, you meet someone in work, you really like them, you know, you develop a relationship, it turns into a romantic relationship. What should you do? Should you go and tell HR? I mean, what would you recommend that that a company does, or that the people involved do? Because you may not know, and you may be happy enough to tell HR, but you might not want every single person in the, I was about to say the newsroom, the office that you work in, being aware of this.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's sometimes why putting an outright ban might not be the best thing to do, because sometimes you might be making it a little bit more attractive for some people as well, you know, to go in
also,
in secret.
It's really difficult for when you work with someone who's, you know, incredibly good looking like me. You know, I do pity the people I work for.
But certainly I do think a lot of businesses will just want to know about it. So a lot might say, look, we know these things can happen, but let us know. And then they can do an assessment to see maybe if there is a conflict of interest, maybe they might move them teams so they're not directly responsible for them. So things like that is usually the sensible way to address it. But I think as you get more senior, you know, there's a lot more responsibility there, a lot more integrity. I think that's what's come into question with this case in the Royal Navy, is the rules and integrity there.
Very, very interesting. I see the Ministry of Defence had a line on this. I should read that out just simply to give them their say on this. Of course, it's probably at the bottom of this pile somewhere. Apologies. Nicole, I will say, first of all, thank you very much for your time. That is Nicole Whittaker, who's Associate Director of HR Consulting at Peninsula. MOD spokesman said an investigation is ongoing and it would be inappropriate to comment at this time. They've gone a bit submarine on that one might argue. Right then, we'll take more of your calls in just a second here on Talk.
There's now a caucus of what's called Blue Labour MPs, and Blue Labour is a tendency within the Labour Party that's been around for about 15 years. which actually predicted the rupture between the Labour Party and the working class because of the party's position on things like globalisation and mass immigration. And understands that actually there is very much a small c conservative thread that runs through many working class communities. You can be Labour, you can be proud Labour, but still be a small c conservative. You know, the post-industrial Britain is full of voters like that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch this evening. It's been quite a show, and there will be more of them tomorrow between 10 and 1. I will be on 10 a.m. Please do join us then. We're talking about all sorts of issues, but one of the issues we're going to talk about is the fact that a number of refugees have been returned to Afghanistan, which then begs the question, if you're an Afghanistani refugee in this country, should you go back? It's an interesting one. We're going to talk about it between 10 and 1. 03444 499 1000 is the number now, of course, between now and 7, and tomorrow. And then on Sunday between 10 and 12, slightly shorter show because of the football, I'm going to be talking to the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, as well. He will be on the show. And now, as always, if you want to get in touch, you're very, very welcome to do so. We might even get an answer from the Health Department on Monday. You never know. They might have done their sums. It'll be a very interesting one. Anyway, lots to discuss in the next few minutes, and we're going to have a chat to Kevin O'Sullivan, who will be here in the chair between 7 and 9 in this studio, and then with what just happened between 9 and 10 as well. I want to talk to Phil in Hertfordshire about the sycamore tree. Phil, am I right, wrong? What do you think?
I personally can't see what the deal is. Okay, it was a bit of a shock. It was quite a famous tree, well known, and a couple of idiots chopped it down. Okay, fine. But I don't think it warrants mainstream media news. I think it could be a distraction because a lot of people will sort of resound with it. But what's more important, Peter, and it has been on mainstream media, is this the government want to start dimming the sun. You know, what on earth are they playing at, wanting to dim the sun? Obviously all in the name of climate change.
How do you actually dim the sun, Phil? I saw this story and I sort of didn't really remember very much about it, but I'm also thinking it was a bit strange.
Yeah, well, I've done a little bit of digging in it. Obviously, you know, you do read things and you can find stuff, and some of it's nonsense, some of it's not.
Yeah.
But they spray in the sky.
Okay.
And they actually, you know, this is where the sort of the conspiracy side of it would or could come into it. But the fact they've mentioned it on mainstream media... No,
it is an idea. It is something that... Yeah, it's AHRA, it's AHRA, I can't remember what that stands for, but it's the sort of government scientific agency. It's the one that Dominic Cummings is always going on about, saying it's a really good idea and saying they can do a lot of things that, you know, the government can't.
Yes, but I mean, what gives them the right to do that, and under what? You know, to protect the planet? Well, where's the proof? And I think it's been going on because sometimes when you do look at the sky and people say, oh, they're contrails, they're not chemtrails. Well, the contrails disappear. Now, these things that they've been spraying in the sky, it looks like a noughts and crosses grid. Now, you're not telling me that's a normal flight path. And they stay in the sky and then they spread within an hour.
Well, it's a very strange thing. This is a controversial experiment exploring the science around reflecting sunlight with an aim to bring about global cooling. We've heard of global warming. This is the Advanced Research and Innovation Agency, ARIA. A government-backed body is funding nearly 60 million quid that could allow real-world experiments, including in the UK. This is as part of the Exploring Climate Cooling Programme. Projects in solar radiation modification will involve trying to thicken Arctic sea ice and making clouds more reflective, presumably reflecting the sun rather than going, am I a good cloud?
Yeah, reflecting heat away from the Earth. But surely, Peter, this is all a natural process. You know, let's in geographical terms, we're just coming out of an ice age, which was, 10, 15,000 years ago, which in the timeline is nothing. So the planet is naturally warming up, and we will go back into another ice age sometime in the future.
I hope it's not anytime soon, Phil.
Oh, no, not anytime soon, not in that lifetime.
We'll be long dead. Phil, thanks for your thoughts on that. Appreciate that. On military schooling, Janet's been in touch from North Wales. Janet, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter.
Hello.
Yeah, I get so frustrated with all of this because, as in virtually every subject, it's always multifaceted.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no one magic bullet. And actually, we're talking about this sort of boot camp in schools.
Yeah.
But these kids have had a generation of the state basically has stripped parents of their authority. We've got teachers in schools who are not allowed to touch a child. So we've allowed these children to become right. My own grandson, I was on a video call with him, and he was bouncing around the kitchen and backed up towards the cooker, and his mum put a hand behind him and he said, "You can't touch me. You're not allowed to touch me without my permission."
Wow. Yeah.
So when we
how old is he? How old is he, Janet?
He was 11 at the time. Now, when we bring these children up, and believe me, I live 100 miles away, and I explained to him that I was willing to get in my car and come over and prove to him that he was wrong.
Yes.
But
how did he react to that, Janet?
He said, "All right, Grandma."
Yeah, you're correct. Yeah.
You know, he told his sister. His sister once said something to me, and he went, "Don't take Grandma on. I'm telling you from experience."
Yes.
You're gonna lose.
I mean, I've been speaking to you for over approximately 2 minutes, Janet, and I wouldn't take you on.
No, but seriously, when we bring these children up like this, and this has been happening, Peter,
yeah, it's true.
over the last 30, 40 years, we've allowed children through the whole children's rights, human rights, and don't get me wrong, nobody wants to see a child abused.
Of course not.
The anti-smacking laws, nobody wants to see a child battered. Nobody wants to see a child smacked within an inch of the line.
What do you think about smacking, Janet? Do you think if it's done in a reasonable and controlled way, do you think it's a reasonable thing?
Yes, I do. I think it has to be an ultimate. I'll tell you another story. My daughter, after the lockdown, she was 12 going into the lockdown, and as a lot of particularly young girls, that's a very bad time for them. Before that, she was a grade A student. After that, she would not go into school.
Right.
My daughter is a single parent and disabled. I know you're short for time.
No, go ahead. Check your time, Janet.
But she was, the school was phoning her. She couldn't get her into school. And one day, this girl, my granddaughter, who I adore, screaming into her mother's face, saying, "I am not going to school." And she lost her temper. She lost her temper, and she had enough, and she didn't know what else to do. She slapped her leg, pushed her out the front door, threw her shoes out after her. At this point, she was 14 and said, "Now get to school."
Wow.
And you know what she did? She went to school. And you know what happened, Peter? The school phoned later on and said, "Well, we're going to have to report this."
The school should be grateful to have her. I mean, it's just, there's nothing illegal there. There's nothing that shouldn't have happened.
No.
In fact, there was a very positive result in that your granddaughter went back to school.
You know what? She's actually now back in school and back on grade A.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure you're very, very glad of that, Janet. And that to me...
Because we stood up to them. But the point is, the state is doing everything to undermine the discipline that children need. And just putting somebody into schools, a boot camp,
military, you think something like that could happen? Bit of discipline,
That's not going to solve it.
Okay. Got to be a bigger thing. Yeah.
A bigger societal change.
Janet, we've got to go because I've got to talk to Kevin O'Sullivan.
I know you have.
But is this your first call to us, Janet? Is this your first call?
Sorry?
Is this your first call?
No, I've spoken to you a couple of times.
Okay, apologies.
Kevin, because he's a little star.
I will, of course.
And so are you.
Oh, you're very kind. Thanks, Janet. Great to talk to you. Some real common sense spoken by Janet in North Wales there. And time now to find out who you could be in with a chance of winning a weekend away in Munich at the end of May to watch the biggest game in European football. That's the Champions League final. Thanks to our colleagues at talkSPORT. We're also putting $5,000 in your pocket, in the winner's pocket, to spend however you want.
Win a once-in-a-lifetime trip to watch the Champions League final live. Go to talksport.com/win for your chance to embark on the ultimate odyssey of football ecstasy. With 2 tickets to the Champions League final live at the iconic Munich Football Arena, Germany, including flights, accommodation, and an uber-massive $5,000 in your hand. How about that? Enter online now at talksport.com/win. Terms and conditions apply. Achtung, baby.
18 plus, UK, excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win all of that, simply text the word football to 83338 by the 16th of May at 11 p.m. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, or send your name and number by post to Champions League final competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 21st of May. This is a TalkSport limited competition run on TalkSport Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Well, that is a superb competition, and of course we will bring you more information about it and play that again over the course of many other programmes. Kevin O'Sullivan is going to be here on the other side of the news, and we're reflecting the news, of course, the breaking news that happened during my programme, that a 31-year-old Iranian man has been arrested in northwest London under the National Security Act 2023 as part of the counter-terrorism policing investigation, in which another 3 Iranian men were detained. That is according to the Metropolitan Police. That's a developing story. We'll make sure that we bring you completely up to date with all of that right throughout the weekend. And speaking of the weekend, Kevin's here next. He's here after the news between 7 and 9 in this studio, and then with what just happened in the bigger studio between 9 and 10, of course. And then tomorrow morning, I will be back between 10 and 1. Big show, of course, Saturday show, lots to discuss. And then on Sunday, I will be here, slightly shorter show because of the football, between 10 and